Hey everybody! I am just putting some navy blue thread in my sewing machine. I hope that everything is set up properly. I'm still new at this. Let's see if the sewing machine will thread itself. Okay. And let me turn on the comments so I can see. Yay! All right, I can see some comments already. Hello, Norma. Good morning from Illinois. And Lori, good morning from California. Hello, Coretta. Hello, Janet. Okay, we have a bunch of people on. I'm so happy. Hello, Beth. Hello, Captain Critch. That's my husband, just so you know. He's going to be letting me know. How's the sound? Especially tell me, Captain Critch, tell me how the sound is. Hello, Sherry. Okay. Good morning, Steve Norma. Norma, good morning, Norma. All right. So I just want you to know you can ask me anything. This technique that I'm going to show you today is super fun. It does take a little bit longer than regular quilt piecing, but I'm using it for a special quilt that I'm making because it helps you get extra perfect, like extra accurate seam allowances, super accurate. And when you're done, your block is going to be perfectly square. So for a special quilt that I'm working on, that's what I want. I want super square blocks and super accurate seam allowances. So that's why I'm using this technique. And I really enjoy it. Okay, before I forget, I'm going to put the navy blue thread here in my sewing machine in the bobbin. The blocks that I'll be working on today are all navy blue, and I'll show you a preview of what I'm making so you know why I'm working with navy blue threads. And I do have a doggie up here with me. Her name is Lola. Okay, so my sewing machine is all set. I just want to show you what we're working on today. So this is not what we're working on today. This is a quilt that I made last year, and I did not release a pattern. As you can tell, this is just a log cabin quilt, and I used 1-inch strips. I cut them all with my AccuQuilt cutter, and it's 10-inch blocks. So you can see that most of my blocks are 2-color log cabins, and I played around with color and value, and almost all of the blocks are 2-color log cabins, but some of them, like in the corners, are all 1-color log cabins. So what I'm working on, and I love this quilt. This quilt, if you'll let me flex a little bit, this quilt is going to be in the Houston Quilt Festival this year in October, and I had no idea it would get accepted. I just entered it on a whim. I have had very few quilts in shows, and I have never had a quilt at the Houston Quilt Festival before. So I am very, very excited. Let's see if we have any comments here. Okay, I'm trying to find comments. Okay, Connie from Minnesota. Hello, Janet. Thank you. I'm glad the sound is good. I got this little boom microphone, which might fall off at any time, but I wanted you to be able to hear me over the sewing machine. So that's why we're doing this. Hello, Laurel from Canada. Hello. It's early for you, honey bunny. Well, welcome. I'm so glad you joined us. Okay, so right here I'm showing you the quilt that I made last year and that I love so much. And when this quilt was accepted into the Houston Quilt Festival, it's such a wonderful feeling to have someone else just acknowledge your work. So I designed another one in this same style because I love this style. So the other one I designed in this style is, good morning, Deb. Good morning. Thank you, Norma. Thank you, Beth. Good morning, Sandy. Good morning, Judy. I think Judy joined us before. So this is the quilt that I designed. I designed it in a program called EQ8, which a lot of quilt designers use, but you don't have to be a quilt designer to use it. And so this one has a lot of all navy blue blocks, as you can see. So this one has a lot of all navy blue blocks, and it also has some dual color blocks too. And something you might notice about this one is that, hi Sharon from Palm Beach, not far from me. Hello, Marcia. Hello, Sandy. Thank you. Thank you. So this quilt is not done. I'm just getting started. You can see behind me, I have some blocks on my design wall. That's all I've done. Well, you can't see the top level. So I've done one top level above that, and then I've done, I think, about 20 blocks. And I need 31 of the all blue blocks. Now, something you're going to see, I'm going to show you here so I used the paper piecing pattern, and you can see this is a log cabin pattern. We're going to need lots of light. Let's see here. Good. Okay. So, oh, this upside down. Well, I can't switch it. Okay. So you can see on this pattern, I'll turn it around for you. It goes A1, A2, those are the first two little strips we'll place, and then A3, A4, A5, A6, A7. It just goes round like you would normally piece a log cabin quilt. So, the thing with this is we have some narrow strips right here, which are going to finish at 1/2 inch. And then we have some wide strips here, which I think are going to finish at, these are 3/4 inch strips. So they're going to finish at 3/4 inch. No. I'll get my little ruler. I can't even remember. Oh yeah, this is the finished. This shows the finished dimensions. So these are going to finish at 3/4 inch, and these are going to finish at 1/2 inch. So you can imagine that when I designed this quilt with smaller blocks, like this block is only going to finish at 6 inches. When I designed this to be much smaller blocks and much smaller strips, I needed a different way to piece them together, because I'm sure you realize, hi Tina, hi Juana, what lurkers are welcome. Hi Lorraine, hi Norma, hi Tina, hi, thank you Norma. So this is going to be 6-inch blocks, which is really tiny. And I knew that I needed a different method to piece these together, or else, I mean, I think I'm a good quilter, but something that tiny, that's really hard to do, especially if I want it to be nice. So I did some research on YouTube, and I found this technique, and I experimented with it a little bit until I printed out the papers and I got started with it. And I'm super happy with the way it's turning out. I'm super happy with my 6-inch blocks are nearly perfect. So then the only like wonkiness is going to come in when I sew the blocks together, because I will be sewing the blocks together in just a regular piecing style. So I'll have to be really careful to keep the blocks looking nice. So, all right. So what we're going to do, so these, and so let me give you a materials list. These pieces that I'm using, these are Carol Doak's freezer paper for quilting. And you can use any freezer paper. You don't need to buy specially cut freezer paper for quilting. But the reason why I did is so that I could run it through my printer. So I printed these up in my printer. I designed them in EQ8, and I printed them up on my printer. And then these have already been used 3 times, which is pretty amazing. Every time I'm done, I take a little lint roller and I just roll it to get, well, these are already cleaned, but to get as much of the fuzz and as much of the extra threads off, and then you can reuse these. I've reused them 4 times before I made new ones, and I think I might be able to get more use out of it. So that would be really great. Okay, so I'm going to start at the very beginning to show you how I'm doing these blocks, and they're going to be all blue. Now, I cut out my strips. I cut out my strips as if I was piecing this quilt that's not foundation pieced, because in the way other people do it, you have to trim after every single piece, and I didn't want to have to trim. So I cut these pieces and I organized them in envelopes. So for example, the first 2 pieces are just little squares. So here's my little squares. And then the next 2 pieces need to be 1.5 by 1 inch. So I cut all of those and I put them in the envelope. So I've got all my pieces already cut. The only ones that are cut differently than I would need if I was making blocks is I cut the last round of pieces that go all the way around here. I cut those a little bit larger so that I can have more to trim when I'm trimming up my block, and you'll see that. So my pieces are already cut. These are all of the blue pieces that I will need for the whole quilt. I have them all pre-cut and ready to go. So now we have to prep. The first thing you have to do is you have to prep your freezer paper to be used. And there is a little bit of prep, but it's not hard. And this is something that you could do like while you're watching TV or, watching your machine embroidery go. This is something that, it's not hard, doesn't require 100% of your attention. But I do need to go ahead and fold every single one of these black lines which would be a stitching line, and I need to make a crease. And I'm using this Dritz Easy Hem. I was using a ruler, but this is easy to make. I just had this tool in my sewing room, and it's easy to make these nice, crisp, and straight creases. So you can start anywhere on your paper. You just need to have as accurate creases as you can for every single line. And obviously, if this were a simpler design, it would not have as many creases in it. But as I go around, the lines get shorter so I can get faster. Let me see if I have any questions. I'll look up here at my comments. Hi, Tamara. Hi, Louise. Hi, Sharon. Yes, Sharon, I also have the 770 QE with the new embroidery unit. Did you get the new embroidery unit? I'm still experimenting with my embroidery unit because before that I embroidered on a baby lock. Hi, Suzette from South Carolina. So I'm so excited that a lot of us have embroidery machines because I want to do embroidery projects with you. So that's what I have scheduled next Tuesday night. I don't know exactly what project we're going to do. I was thinking of doing the In the Hoop sunglasses case. If anybody is interested in doing a In the Hoop sunglasses case next Tuesday night, let me know. And that might be the project that we do. And the free pattern is available. You can find the links on my blog, but I might just make it easier to find and just share it like free in my shop or something so everyone can get it more easily. Hi, Rama from India. Someone from India. I don't know. What time is it there? Oh my gosh. Good morning from Yakima, Washington. I know where that is. Washington is such a beautiful state. I want to take a Northwest tour, a tour of the United Northwest US with my family. I spent time there while I was in college, but I haven't been back with my family. Sharon likes the sunglass case idea. Okay. Well, I'll just need to somehow upload that to my shop, but make it free so that anyone before or after the live stream can get it. It's a super easy project, and we'll definitely be able to make it in not very much time. And it's so useful. Like, I designed that sunglass case years ago, but I made a whole bunch in lots of different Tula Pink fabrics, and I still use them. Like, I have one in my car, one in my purse, because since I've been getting older, I don't like wearing contact lenses, and so I just have glasses, and I have prescription sunglasses. That's all I use, and I go blind everywhere else. Okay, so this is all ready. As you can see, while we were talking, I went ahead and hi, Judy from North Carolina. As we were talking, I went ahead and I creased every single line in this paper, and it looks kind of like the ones that I was using previously, except it's new. So we'll use this one first. Okay, so we'll use this one first. And I've got my little Aliso iron here, all hot. I find that it is really useful to have a setup like this. So I'm not going to need this again today. So I've got this. I find but I am going to need my little trimming tools. So I'll keep those close. And I may need my seam ripper. Hopefully not, but I may. And so I've got this. So because I have all my pieces pre-cut, I'm not going to use scraps. You can totally, and I will show you how to use this technique using scraps. But I don't want to do all that trimming, so I pre-cut all my pieces. So we need 2 little squares that are going to be our A1 and A2. So since I want this to be kind of random, I'm just going to pick 2 pieces that don't match. And I'm done with envelope 1 for now. So I'm going to set envelope 1 over on the other side of my sewing machine. I've got all the other envelopes up here right above my pressing place. So first thing I'm going to do, oh, another thing. Hold on, I'll be right back. I want to have pressing paper under here that will just help me preserve. It will help me preserve the, can you even hear me? My microphone's not hooked up. Okay, let me hook up my mic. Well, first let me grab the pressing paper. Okay, and this pressing paper is pretty old. You know what I should do? Okay. Hi from England. Hi, Liz. I recognize Liz from before. Okay, I'm going to just cut off these ugly edges of my pressing paper. This pressing paper is like 10 years old. You can also use one of those nonstick pressing mats. I like that this is white, but and I'll show you why. So this doesn't need to be huge, and this is just to help me preserve this, so this waxy side doesn't pick up any of the fuzzies from my pressing mat. So I'm going to start with this one. This will be my A1, and I'm going to place it right side up over the little A1 box, and I can see the A1 box clearly because it says A1 through the paper, plus I crease all those lines. So I'm going to place this over the A1. And because my pressing paper is white, I can see it through the paper. So I'm just going to press that. And you see here, I'm pressing the whole paper, and I don't want it to get stuck to my pressing mat or pick up any fuzzies. I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so we've got the first one on A1. Now we need A2. So what I'm going to do is fold this back, and I will repeat this process again for anyone who comes in late or wants to see it again, because you might want to see this process more than once. Hi, Annette. Oh my goodness, Annette has 2 embroidery machines. I love you. I love embroidery. Okay, so this is piece 2, and I want to sew it to piece 1. I'm going to just place it like this. You see that because I cut this the right size, we've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance already. And this is the right size, so I already have my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to place this down and pick it up like that. They're right sides together. Wait a minute, I'm sewing it to the wrong side. Oh, yes, this is going to be right. Okay, so then I'm moving it over to my sewing machine. Can you hear me? How's the sound, everybody? Okay, this will be the test how the sound is when my sewing machine is going. So I've got this blue color thread in my sewing machine. I'm going to turn on the laser light, which really helps. Now these first few pieces sometimes like to get folded and stuck in the feed dogs. So let's hope that doesn't happen. So I'm just sewing. Okay, so I want you to notice that, where's my stiletto? Okay. I want you to notice that I am sewing right next to the fold, and I'm going to sew all the way across my pieces. And I'm not sewing on the paper because I have the paper folded back, and I'm sewing right next to the fold of the paper. And this is what is going to help me have my perfect seam allowance. So I sewed all the way across the fold of the paper. Okay. And because I folded it so nicely, that is what is going to, I folded my paper already so nicely that helped me to be very accurate because this is where the seam allowance is. So then I'm going to fold this back and it goes right over. Oh, my piece came off. Okay, this happens sometimes when your pieces are little. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this and I'm going to place it right over with my seam, right over that, the A1, A2 line. If you can see it through the paper, I'm going to place it right over the A1, A2 line. Okay, I'm going to press here to kind of like stick it to my freezer paper. Then turn it over, press really good. Stick it to my freezer paper really good. Okay, and I can see through the paper. Peel it off. Okay, there's my pieces stuck. I can see through the paper that I've got my seam allowances all the way around. That seam right there might not be exactly in the center, but it's good enough. I'm going to keep going and no one will ever know. So here's my little seam, which is hopefully right over that little seam line, but it's okay. Hopefully, I don't think we'll get any more pieces coming off. That generally only happens at the very beginning because you don't have very much fabric stuck to your freezer paper yet. So the next one is A3. We did A1 and A2. Now we're going to do A3. So I can look at these and say, oh, I don't have this fabric yet. Okay, I'm just going through my envelope. I don't have this fabric on this block yet. So since I'm trying to make it random, I use that. And now what I'm going to do, since I'm putting on piece 3, I'm going to very carefully fold it back along the seam line for piece 3. And this is less than a 1/4 inch, probably because I removed it and put it back on because it came off. So I'm just going to try and keep in mind that I want a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So it's okay if it sticks up a little bit on top because I'm getting my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to take this and now I'm going to move it to my sewing machine. Okay, and I'm just going to sew all the way across right next to the line of the folded freezer paper. I'm not sewing on the folded freezer paper. And I will tell you now, this is going to make it so easy at the end because my piece is not pressed, is not sewn to the freezer paper. That's why I can reuse my freezer papers again and again and again because it's not reused or it's not sewn to the paper. I don't have to rip the paper off. Isn't that wonderful? I don't have to rip the paper off, which sometimes rips your stitches. I don't have to do any of that. Okay, so we've got these. This might look a little wonky, and it might look a little wonky because we are, oh, I didn't switch you to the pressing camera. Okay. So what I did, it looked like, so now we've got piece 3 on. The the freezer paper I'm using, this is Carol Doak's freezer paper, and I only bought that because it can go through the printer. Not a laser printer, but a jet printer, an inkjet printer. So that's why I bought it. But if you want to use any freezer paper and just cut the sheets down to 8.5 by 11, you can do that. But I really do like this freezer paper. So now let's do piece A4. So here's piece A4. I'll fold it back long. Okay. And now let's pick out a piece for A4. So here's my A4 pieces. Let's see here. I think I used that one. I have not used this little sparkly one. I haven't used this yet. So let's use that. Put my 4 envelope over here. Okay, so now I'm just going to place this down. Now this seam allowance looks to be about 1/4 inch. This seam allowance looks to be about a little more than 1/4 inch, but that really doesn't matter. Okay, so I will pick it up. These are tiny pieces, by the way. If you did this with bigger pieces, it would be easier. But my point of view is if you're doing it with big pieces, then why bother? Just piece it. Okay. So since these blocks, I wanted to use itty bitty pieces for an itty bitty log cabin. Because of that, I decided to use this technique. Okay, so I'm going to switch you to my pressing camera. So we have this sewn. It was like this. After I sewed it, I added the other piece on, right sides together, and look how like wonky that is. And that's okay that it's okay that all of these pieces look so wonky because I'm using this technique. And obviously it would be really hard to keep great seam allowances if you're using 1 inch and 1 1/4 inch strips to have 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch finished log cabin strips. So now I'm just going to fold this piece back, finger press it, and then I'll press it from the paper side so that everything I've sewn so far is sticking to the paper. Okay. So far, so good. And see, all of my seams look nice and straight, and everything that is wonky is going to be in the seam allowances, and it will be fine. So the next one we're on is A5. So since I pre-creased this paper, it's really easy to just fold it back along A5. Okay. And now I need to pick a piece for A5. So I'll just take the first one. I haven't used that yet. Put A5 over here. Let's see here. Hi, Brenda. I'll catch you up. Don't worry. Hi. All right. Wendy says, let's see here. Oh, her machine is dead. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're learning the technique, and we will all send happy thoughts to you that either your machine starts working again or you're ready for a new one soon. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, let's get going again. Okay, so what we're going to do, we folded this back like this. Now this is like more than 1/4 inch seam allowance. So what I'm going to do is just kind of place it over so I don't keep getting more and more of a large seam allowance. So you see here, this is placed right sides down, and this overlaps a tiny bit. Okay. And move you to the sewing scene. Here we go. Let's see here. And now I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Well, I'm not really even paying attention to seam allowance because I'm sewing right next to the freezer paper. And I'll cut it. Okay. So, hi, Nancy. Yes, Baby Lock Solaris is a wonderful embroidery machine. How did I cut the pieces? Okay, so I cut these pieces exactly accurate. Almost all of them I cut exactly accurate, so I wouldn't need to be trimming. If my pieces were big, then at this point, and this is kind of big, but it's not too big for me to not want it in the seam allowance. But if I was using scraps, then at this point, I would have a lot of extra in the seam allowance. So if I was using scraps, oh, my ruler is way over there. Okay, just a minute. I have to go get my ruler because it's way on the other side of my cutting table. Okay. Okay, I am back and I will hook up my microphone. Where's the microphone cord? Seriously. Here it is. Okay, let me hook up the microphone. Wait, while I'm up, I have to turn my AC down. Okay. It gets hot up here in my studio sometimes. Okay, so if I was using scraps or pieces that were too big, then at this point I could place a little ruler, put the 1/4 inch line right along my seam line, and I could trim it off. Especially if I had a really sharp rotary cutter. So now it's perfect. Okay, and that's what you would need to do if you were using scraps. But I cut all my pieces the right size, except the very last ones that are going to go around the outside edge. I cut those a little bit wider so that when I trim at the end, I have extra to trim off and make my blocks perfect. All right. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Michelle. Okay, so what foot and needle position work for this method? It doesn't really matter because you're using the paper to help you get a 1/4 inch to get the perfect seam allowance. So yes, I have the 1/4 inch piecing foot on my machine and I have it set up for piecing. I have a 2-inch stitch or a 2 stitch length, but it doesn't really matter. You can use your favorite foot. I wouldn't use a walking foot because it might get caught on the paper, but you could use, if you have a clear foot that you love to use, you can use that. You could use your regular foot. You could use any foot that you love. You might even be able to use a walking foot. I didn't try that because I didn't want it to get caught on the paper, but this is my 1/4 inch piecing foot, and that was just because I had it in, so I left it in. Okay, so since that is trimmed, we're gonna keep going. So, honey, this is not, honey bunny, this is not regular paper piecing. Regular paper piecing, you stitch through the paper and then it also makes absolutely perfect blocks, but you stitch through the paper and then you have to tear off all the papers at the end. So that I could have used this technique for this quilt. I'll show you one more time the quilt that I'm making. So this is the quilt that I'm making and it has tiny 6-inch blocks. And so the tiny 6-inch blocks have tiny little strips. And I knew that if I tried to do this with regular piecing, I would have really wonky blocks. And you see there are a lot of all blue ones. So those are the only pieces I've cut so far is for the all blue ones. I will actually be picking fabrics and cutting fabrics for the rest of the quilt after I get the all blue blocks sewn. And I'm about halfway done. I think I'm more than halfway done with my all blue blocks. Okay, so let's go back to the pressing table. We need to press this piece. So I just sewed this piece and I trimmed it, which I'm not doing much trimming because I'm not doing much trimming because I already cut my pieces to the correct size. I'm just going to give that a little press, and then I'll press it really good from the paper side. I have got this old raggedy piece of pressing paper here that is helping this, my pretty new template, to stay nice and clean, because I want to be able to use this at least 4 times. So I don't have to print a new one and do all that folding technique. I want to be able to use this at least 4 times, which you can't do with regular paper piecing. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Brenda. Yes, so with regular paper piecing, you do need a new paper for each block. And yes, with the freezer paper piecing and folding, you can reuse it until your freezer paper doesn't stick to the paper anymore, doesn't stick to the fabric anymore. So that's why I'm being really careful. I'm using this pressing paper. You could also use one of those applique mats that you use that fabric doesn't stick to, or your heat and bond doesn't stick to. So I'm being really careful to keep this paper clean so that I can reuse it as many times as I can. All right, so we've got this much done. So the next one we are on is A6. So I'm just gonna fold it back, kind of unstick these from the paper, the seam allowance. Now look, I've got a huge seam allowance right here. So in that case, and that's another thing you can do with this, you don't need to use your rotary cutter to trim your seam allowances. You can just use scissors. So I can just use scissors because it really doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so the next one is A6. So I'm gonna come to my little A6 envelope and try and pick one that I haven't used before. So I know I haven't used this one before. It's really dark, but that's okay. And since this one is kind of wrinkly from being in the envelope, I'm just gonna press it flat. Okay, and then I want these to be right sides together. So I'm gonna lay this down and carefully lay this on top. And since this seam allowance looks more like 3/8 to me, and I want to be careful to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm just gonna not put the edges together, and that's fine, right? I like that. Here's where my seam line will be. That's gonna have a nice seam allowance right there. So then I hold these together while I move to my sewing machine. Okay. And this cord. There we go. I like to put the microphone cord behind me, and hopefully it won't get in my way. Oh, the microphone's totally falling out of my ear. Okay. All right. Technical difficulties not yet averted. Okay. 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 If you can all still hear me. Hi from Louisiana, Gail. Hi, Tessa from Trinidad and Tobago. Wow. Yes, Liz, it is a lot of tiny pieces. This quilt is going to take me, maybe a year to make. And that's okay. I'm using Twitch, and I think I might I'm gonna plan all of my scheduled live streams and send out lots of notifications so everyone knows. But there might be times when I am working in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day, and I just want someone to talk to, that I might just come on Twitch and turn it on, and I'll be under the just chatting category, and we will just chat while I piece these. So if you are signed up for Twitch and you follow me, then you will know when I just go on randomly. It will only be on Twitch, and it won't be super interesting. It'll just be me sewing and chatting. Won't that be fun? Okay, so now we're gonna sew on piece, which piece are we on? Piece A6. I can see right here that it's A6. Fold it back. If I sew right along this line, it's going to give me the perfect seam allowance, because this right here, this is my stitch line, right? This is what I want my stitch line to be. So it really doesn't matter what the seam allowance is, because this edge of the paper is right where the seam line is going to be. I just cut my pieces to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that's why I'm trying to um, make these seam allowances about a 1/4 inch, because that's how my pieces are cut. All right, so now we go back to the pressing. Oh my gosh, look, that slipped. This piece slipped before I sewed it. So that means the unpicker is necessary. And I have used 60 weight thread in my bobbin, which is easy to unpick. It's not super, it's strong enough, right? It's strong enough for piecing, because after piecing, your quilt is still going to be sandwiched and quilted. So I feel perfectly comfortable using 60 weight thread in my bobbin. And then my bobbin doesn't run out very quickly. And when I have to unpick, it's not hard. Okay, so we're going to try again. I'm going to fold this back. I'm going to press it a little. Oh, I shouldn't press that side. Press it a little bit. Make sure everything's all stuck real good. Place these right sides together again. Okay. There we go. It's right sides together. And this time when I sew it, I'm going to really try hard not to let those pieces slip as I put them under my sewing machine. I hope I'm not making this look really hard, because it's not really hard. You know, with like all quilting, I'm just showing you everything that could go wrong, and I'm showing you really slowly. When I get in my groove doing this, I'm doing 3 or 4 blocks at a time. I'm chain piecing, and I'm doing it a lot faster. Now look, my seam allowance is huge here. But when I fold this over, I can see that it covers the next seam allowance just fine. It covers the next seam allowance with a 1/4 inch seam, or with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm not worried. I'm just going to press it down, and look how these seams are all perfectly straight. They're all perfectly straight because we're sewing next to the edge of the paper, not trying to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So, and this one, here's where the seam line will be for this one. And this one is going to be a little close here, but that looks like a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance to me. So it's okay. And this is all wonky, but it's okay. My block's going to be perfect. So the next one that we are on is, let's see here, A7. So now I'm just going to fold the paper back for A7. This is a different one that's turning out with a scant seam allowance, but that's okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. Good morning, Sherry. Karen. Yes, Brenda. If I did not put, yeah, you can put your pieces on, or let's see here. Brenda says she likes my envelopes. Envelopes are reusable too. And there was a lady who put her pieces on individual stacked paper plates. You can do that too, but I live in Florida, so I have my AC on high up here. I have ceiling fans. When I have little pieces that aren't contained, they blow away. Okay, thank you, Tessa. All right, so let's get a piece out for A7. You can see my envelopes are already starting to get old, because I've been doing this for a while. Okay, this piece is gonna look nice, right? This is like scrappy high volume, right? Or low volume, or whatever, dark blue low volume. I just went through to pick out fabrics for this quilt. I just went through and picked out all these dark blue fabrics that didn't have crazy prints. I mean, it's not this kind of a crazy print, but I picked out dark blue fabrics that when I stood back, they all pretty much read as dark blue. And a lot of them are scraps. Okay, so the next piece, A7, is right here. And we need to place this right along to make hopefully a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. Then we're going to move over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew right along the edge of the paper. I'm not paying attention to seam allowance. If you see here on my 1/4 inch foot, definitely not keeping a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just following right next to the edge of the paper. And if your machine has a little laser light like mine does, the laser light has been helping me to sew right next to the edge of the paper. Okay, so now it looks like this. All right, we've got our other piece sewn on. And I'm going to start by finger pressing this back against the paper. That also helps you to make sure that you've got good enough seam allowances. See right here, I can see what the next stitching line will be right here. And I've got really nice seam allowance. So I'm going to finger press that back and then turn it over and press from this side. If I pressed from this side my iron, there's a good chance my iron would stick to the freezer paper, which I don't want. So I turn it over and press from this side. I've got the pressing paper here to protect my freezer paper because, I mean, I use my pressing mat a lot and it has lots of little fuzzies and threads on it usually. So this helps me to keep this nice and clean as long as possible. All right, so we've got this one done. You can press as much as you want. Now our next one is A8. So here's A8. Just going to fold it back. I pre-creased my paper, so I'm going to fold it back along the pre-crease line. That's not a perfect seam allowance, but that doesn't matter. All right, so now I'm going to pick from my stash a piece that I haven't used yet. I don't think I've used this. This is Moda Grunge. I haven't used that yet. That's pretty. So I'll lay this down right side up, and then right side down I'll place all these. Try and place it so that I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just because I already cut my pieces as if I was using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I wouldn't have to do trimming in between every single step. So put it down and sew right next to the paper. See here, if you see here, this is my underneath piece of fabric and this is my over, and this does not have a 1/4 inch seam allowance and this has more than a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's okay. Well, I'll check to see if it's okay. I'll check to see if I have enough fabric to go over the entire piece and have a seam allowance. So yeah, that's kind of a wide seam allowance I left there, but yeah, that's really wide. But I've got like a scant 1/4 inch for it to reach into the next strip. So I'm just going to leave it. I could unpick that, but it's got a scant 1/4 inch there. I've done worse. I've definitely done worse. So, okay, so our next one is A9. So I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to go fold back. This says A9. So I'm going to fold back along the line that connects it with A9. Oh, look what a nice seam allowance I have there. Okay, so I'll turn this back so I see what I'm working with. And now in my little envelope here, I'm going to pick one that I hopefully haven't used before for A9. Look at this one. This one has some nice little, that's a Tula Pink print. It has cute little things that look like sprinkles. It might even be called sprinkles. But it got folded in the envelope, so I'll press it flat. Okay, so this is right side up. This is right side down. Okay. Pick it up. It's ready to go. I think this is hopefully a little easier to understand now that I have bigger pieces that I'm working with. And this is really a complicated block. You could totally do this with an easier block and it would be, that's okay. You could, I lost my pressing paper. I'll get it. See, it's the ceiling fans and the AC. They make everything blow around up here. But I live in Florida. I can't live without my ceiling fans and my AC. Okay, so I sewed all the way across. Don't worry about seam allowances here and here. I just sewed all the way across. And this is what it looks like now. I'm gonna reach down and get my pressing paper. Okay. Pressing paper with the shiny side up. All right, I'm not going to need these for a minute. Okay, so we've got, this is the seam that I just sewed. I did pretty good seam allowance there. Gonna fold it up, finger press it. I'll fold back my freezer paper. Okay, finger pressed. Press it to the paper, through the paper. Okay. Yes, Connie says that snack bags or sandwich bags would work too. That's a great idea. Yes. Norma says she has to go. Yes, you can catch it later. You can catch it later. Tessa asks, what size does this particular block is going to finish at 6 inches. So as you can see, these are the finished size of the strips. My strips are 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, and 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch. The reason, this cool thing, the really amazing thing about making a log cabin with one size strips on one side and one size strips on the other side, the really cool and amazing thing is that you get pieces that looked curved. Like on this is what I'm making. And when I start doing, I mean, it's going to appear curved if you look really close at the all blue blocks, but when I start adding other colors, then it looks kind of like I have curves in these leaves and these flowers. And it's really just an illusion because on one side I have fat strips and on the other side I have skinny strips. So it's just an illusion. You don't have to sew any curves, but that is why I have fat strips and skinny strips. So let's go back to our pressing. Honey bun, I have my little baby Aliso iron on as hot as possible. I generally always press as hot as possible with quilting fabrics. And then when I switch to, if I try and do some garment making, I'll lower the temperature for synthetic fabrics. But when I'm quilt piecing, I always have it on as hot as possible. Gracie says she's been following my blog for a while. What tool that is on your sewing machine? Well, let me see. Oh, this tool right here. This is my sewing stiletto, which is really cool. I love this sewing stiletto, and I love the one that's from Biani. This one is especially nice because it has this stitch eraser on the bottom, which you can just go like this after you've unpicked stitches. You have those little threads that might stay in the fabric. So after you've unpicked your stitches, you can use this to kind of wipe them away, and it does a good job. So I like both those stilettos. I like this one, and I don't know what it's called. The name is gone. But you can find it. Just search for sewing stiletto with a stitch eraser, and you'll find this one. But I also really love my Biani because on the other end, the Biani has a slanted tool that you can use to finger press or fingernail press your seams. So I love both of them. And I almost never sew without a stiletto. A stiletto is an amazing tool. Okay, Honey Bun has the same iron. Okay, so now we've got this all pressed and it looks good. And my next one is A10. So I'm going to fold this back. There's A10. We've got wonky seam allowances. If I really cared, I could go ahead and trim those off. But to tell you the truth, it really doesn't matter because no one's ever going to see it. Okay. So in my A10 envelope, let's see what I have available. Oh, this one would be really cute. Or it might be time for me to have another one that's like, this is a print, but it's just like a very subtle print. Oh, let me, hold on. Okay, so I'm looking in my envelope for A10. I think I want to add another like almost solid piece. I don't have any solid pieces in here, but this one is almost solid. It's got a really like modeled print. And I think this is getting kind of busy. So I'm going to tone it down with this modeled print. So I'll move my A10 envelope over here and I'll place this right side up. I'm going to place my seam allowance right side down on top of it. Try and center it as best I can. Pick it up all together. And then I'm going to move over to my sewing machine. And My laser light shows where I'm going to start sewing. You don't need a fancy sewing machine with a laser light at all. You can use any sewing machine. That's the great thing about this. You don't need a piecing foot. You don't need a fancy sewing machine. You just need a straight stitch sewing machine. So I could be using a straight stitch sewing machine without a piecing foot or anything, because instead of paying attention to my seam allowance here, I'm just paying attention to sewing right next to the paper. And if you do sew on your paper, I might sew on the paper. When I first started doing this, I did sew on the paper quite a bit. You try not to sew on the paper because you don't want to ruin your paper, because you want to be able to reuse it. But if you do sew on the paper, sometimes you can carefully unpick it and then you can still use your paper. Okay, so this quilt, if I remember right, this quilt, I think I have 9 blocks by 9 blocks. So that would be 6 times 9 is 6 times 9. What's 6 times 9, people? Oh, you threw me for a loop, Tessa. Tessa asked me a difficult question. What size is the quilt gonna finish at? Okay, so the center of the quilt is 6 times 9, so that's 54. So the center of the quilt is going to be 54 by 54, and then I added a border, which is 3-inch border. So thank you, Sherry. Sherry gave me the right answer because I have a hard time doing math under pressure. The answer is 34. Thank you, Sherry. So it's going to be 54 by 54 square when the inside of the quilt is done. And then I'm going to add a 3-inch border, so it will be 60 inches finished. And if enough people want it, I can make a pattern out of this and publish it. But on the Sew Can She blog, I mostly just publish easy patterns. I don't know if you've noticed, because most people who are looking for a free pattern are looking for something super easy. And if you want something super difficult, most people are willing to pay for that. So most people expect to pay for that because they don't think they can get a good pattern that's free. It's just common. It's just our psyche. But I hope you think that all of my patterns, even though they're super easy, I hope you think they're really good. Okay. So Gracie wants a pattern for this. I will try, but this quilt isn't going to be done for like a year, so it's going to be a while. And I can provide a free pattern for this. The thing is, on Sew Can She, the more difficult quilt patterns nobody wants. People just want the easy ones. So, okay. Let's go ahead. We're going to keep going. So the next one I need to do is A11. I'm going to fold back. This is A11 strip. And I know that because I'm looking up here at my envelopes, and the next envelope I have is A11. So that helps me too. The envelope system helps me know which strip I'm on next. So fold back along the A11 line. I could trim that, but I don't really care. Here's my A11. Ooh, I haven't used this polka dot yet, I don't think. Well, it'll be right next to this one that's kind of dotty, so I don't think I'll use that. Here's a really pretty dark floral fabric. I think I want that to go next to there. Put this next envelope back. So these two will be next to each other. So I'll lay this right side up, lay this right side down. Okay, try and keep the piece underneath to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or 1/4 inch away from the fold of the paper. Right, so then I move back to my sewing machine. Okay, and I'm going to sew right next to the fold of the paper. Okay, so you see I sewed this, and it actually is starting to look like a log cabin block, right? Like, this is from the back. It looks kind of like we might look if we're making a log cabin block. And then when we fold this back, like, it is starting to look like a log cabin block. And because I'm using this method, all of my little lines are perfectly straight. Now, Obviously, if you're making a regular log cabin block and you've got wider pieces, you probably wouldn't want to go to all this extra work. Well, is it a lot of extra work? I don't know. You wouldn't want to you might not want to use this method on a regular log cabin block. But if you're using tiny pieces like I am and you are concerned and you want to, if you're being a perfectionist to yourself, which I don't recommend, but see, I can be a perfectionist in this way because I can be a perfectionist here because it's not hard. I'm not stressing out because I know that using the paper is going to make it good. So I'm not stressing about my seam allowances. Maybe that's why I love this method because I can get perfect seam allowances or perfectly straight seams and not stress. I'm having fun. I'm not stressing. I only had to unpick one, and that's because the strip totally slipped out of the way and didn't even get sewn on all the way. So maybe that's why I love this method. All right. Okay, so I did get some spam. I'm going to... Okay, so I just got a spam comment, but I deleted it. Okay. Hi, honey bunny. Sewing for 50 years and quilting for less than a year. That's what she said. Sewing for 50 years and quilting for less than a year. You know what? Once you start making quilts, you don't want to make anything else. At least that's my experience. Once I started making quilts, I rarely make clothes. I do like to make bags. And crafty little things that are finished quickly so I can get back to my quilts. Okay, Sherry's leaving. Bye, Sherry. Catch the replay. Have a great day. Okay, so we are going to just keep on going. We are at the pressing table. I want to finish this block for you. So the next one we're on is A12, and this is where we're going to have that itty bitty seam allowance. Look at my itty bitty seam allowance. It is like, it's more than 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to let it slide. It's more than 1/8 of an inch. I'm just going to make sure that my A12 piece has the correct seam allowance. So I know we haven't used this strip yet. Haven't used this fabric yet. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay this here. These two are pretty much a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to use those as my guide. And you can see the fabric that's faced up under here a little bit, but this one where I messed up, I used a really wide seam allowance on the other side of the strip. I'm just going to let that slide. See, maybe that's why I like this method so much, because I'm not stressing. I'm not unpicking as much. I'm not looking at wonky seams and thinking, oh, should I unpick that and re-sew it? Because on the actual side of the block that everyone's going to see, it looks perfect. Isn't that wonderful? So on the side of the block that everyone's going to see, it looks perfect. On the back, you can see my seam allowances are all over the place. But on the side of the block that everyone's going to see, right? Like, let's look here. On the side of the block that everyone's going to see, my seam allowances look perfect. Now, take a look. Well, the back is covered up by the paper, so we don't even have to look at that. Hallelujah. Okay. So I'm going to press this piece. I can use my iron a little bit more on the front of the block like that because my block is getting bigger. So I'll press this down. Okay, so my next piece is A13. So here's A13. I know that because I looked at the envelope. Okay, here's my seam allowance, which is totally wonky, but that doesn't matter. Okay, so let's pick a fabric for A13. This one looks good. Haven't used this one yet. Or should we get something a little busier? Let's see here. I think I saw this one is a little busier. We haven't used that one yet. Let's use that one. So put away my 13 envelope. And the pieces in here sometimes get folded over, but that's okay because I've got a hot iron right here and I can use it. So place down, face up, and then I'm going to place this up, trying to catch 1/4 inch on next, like you thinking that the fold of the paper is my seam allowance, trying to use that. I'm going to slide it over a little bit. Okay. And I can look, make sure everything's all centered on the other side. Then I'll move here. Okay. See, look, this is a huge seam allowance right here. This is huge, but it really doesn't matter. Okay, I could trim that off if I wanted, but I don't think it's big enough that it'll be a problem. And if I did think that that was big enough that it would be a problem, then what I could do is just take some scissors. I don't even have to use a rotary cutter and cut it off. So now it's a 1/4 inch like everything else, or approximately, because in this technique we approximate, except for when you're sewing right next to the paper. You don't want to approximate when you're sewing right next to the paper because that's what helps you get your perfectly straight line. So I'm going to finger press this back. And it's hard for, it doesn't really show on camera, but I am able to see my fabric pieces through the paper, which is also helping me to know that my seam allowances are okay, because I can actually see the fabric through the paper a little bit, but it's hard to see that on camera, but I can see the fabric through the paper. Okay, so my next one is A14. Fold this back like that. And that's got a huge seam allowance. Doesn't matter. Okay, so let's see what's going to look good. That's a real plain one. So I don't want one that's super plain. There's all my pieces. I might have to start repeating fabrics because I just might have to now. I didn't cut so many. Although there's one I haven't used before. I don't really mind if I have to repeat a fabric and there's a tiny one here and then a big one out here. I don't mind that. I just don't want to have the same fabric right next to each other. So we picked out this fabric. Give it a little press. Okay. Turn this so they're right sides together. Okay. The one underneath is the one I'm trying more to get the 1/4 inch away from the fold of the paper. The one on top is already sewn and doesn't matter. So we go over to the sewing machine. Okay. All right. Do we have any questions? Let's see here. Ana says gracias. De nada. Ellen says sound is good. Thank you. Thank you. I know sound is so important in videos. If the sound is bad, it's hard to watch. Okay. Pressing this a little bit. And I'll press it from this side. And I'm so excited. Oh, hold on. I forgot. Okay. I'm so excited by how perfect my block is looking. Look, even though my seam allowances have been totally wonky from the actual front of my block where people are going to look, it looks just beautiful. So the next one is A15. A15 is this strip right here. So I'm just going to fold it back along the line for A15. Here's my envelope that's labeled A15. And I'm going to pick a fabric that would look good. So I'm starting to have to repeat fabrics. This one I put way down here in the middle, so that's a good option. Let's see what we got here. I don't think I have even used this one with the little plus signs on it. So I think I'll just use that one. I won't have to repeat the fabric yet. Okay, so this is going to be my next strip to go right there. So I'll place it right side up. Then if you remember, or if you saw me, I already pre-creased all the lines in this so that it's really easy. Now, oh, I remember, I cut these strips. As I see here, this is where it needs, this strip I just cut too long. I made a mistake in my cutting. All of them are cut that long. So I'm just going to cut off a tiny bit. I can cut it off now or I can trim it off later. So I'm going to center these on. This seam allowance for the fabric on top, I'm not worrying about. I'm trying to get the fabric on bottom to be a 1/4 inch away from the fold. A little bit of unevenness is okay, but if it's too uneven, then it will make it hard to keep sewing the next seam allowance. So we're going to sew right next to the fold of the paper. If you sew on the paper a tiny bit, it's okay. You don't want to sew on the paper a lot or you'll have to unpick it. Because the wonderful thing about this technique that I told people earlier is that at the end, it's not like regular paper piecing where you have to pull off all those itty bitty papers or big paper. You don't have to pull off any papers. That's the wonderful thing about this. I won't have to pull off any papers. The paper is gonna just come off the block like magic. All right, so look how beautiful that's looking. And you know, my seam allowances have been totally wonky. I mean, I try to keep to a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but it's hard with tiny strips like this. And it looks beautiful from the front, from the place people are gonna look. All right, we've got 4 strips left. So now we're doing A16. And A16 is one, so all we have left are these outside strips right here. So when I cut the outside strips, I cut them a little bit wider than I'm gonna need, and you will see why. In fact, I cut them, I do have to do some trimming because they're all kind of big. Oh, look, we haven't used this one yet. This one is so pretty. It's an old cotton and steel print. Okay, so this one is wider, you'll see, and it's even bigger. So I'm gonna cut it and trim it a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna place this down with my 1/4 inch seam allowance on the bottom and not worrying about the top. I can trim this off because that, if that bothers me, you don't really have to. Okay, so I've placed it down. I want it 1/4 inch away from the fold of the paper as best I can. All right, and then I'm moving to my sewing machine. I'm just gonna sew this. And then you will see why I cut my last round of strips a tiny bit wider than necessary. Okay. So switch it to pressing view. Okay, so I'll press this back. Now I can fit the whole iron on my block. Okay, when I fold back the paper, I'm going to press it. Now, when I am done with this block, I'm going to use a rotary cutter and a ruler to cut along this line. This is the outside edge of my block. And you see, because I made this strip wider, this strip extends over the outside edge of my block. I can see through the paper and I can see the dashed line, which is my cutting line, my final squaring up and cutting line. And this extends over my final cutting, squaring up and cutting line. So then I have extra to trim away. Don't you love it when you have extra to trim away? I mean, not too much extra. You don't want to ruin your block, but when you have a little bit extra to trim away, then you can square your block up perfectly. And so I'm really excited that that's what I have here. So now my next one is A17. So I will fold it back to reveal the seam allowance. Then in my little A17 envelope, oh, we haven't used this one yet. That's pretty. Okay, I'll use that one. Okay, I'm gonna press it because it got folded. in the envelope. And I'm going to use this edge because I know this edge will get cut off. So now A17. Okay. This is going to be off the edge of the block. This line right here is where I need a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to line it up perfectly with that edge. There we go. It's a little bit less of a seam allowance than what I had on top, but that's okay. Isn't it wonderful how you don't have to like be perfectly accurate? That is why I'm using this. Thank you, Lori. Lori says the blues look beautiful together. Thank you, Lori. I do love navy blue. I really love navy blue. Okay, so I'm sewing right next to the fold of the paper, as close as I can without sewing on the fold of the paper, but just about any quilting mistake, you can fix it. So here we go. This is what it looks like. Okay, so that's a pretty good, nice straight seam. I'm going to fold it over, and you see this extends past the paper. It's definitely going to get trimmed off because I used a wider strip, wider than is needed for my last row. Just my last little round of log cabin strips, I used wider than needed because I'm definitely going to trim those. Okay, so next we have A18. Only 2 left, guys. Only 2 left. And normally when I'm doing this not on camera, I strip piece, chain piece, I chain piece, and I chain piece, and I can get 3 done. I do 3 at a time, and I can get 3 done in like an hour. So this is taking longer because I'm chatting so much. All right, so here's my A18 envelope, and let's see here. I haven't used this polka dot yet. Let's make sure it looks good next to the piece. Yeah, that looks good. Again, I'm not being too picky because with something like this, we've got so many different fabrics, and even if something matches, ending up next to something else that matches, it still looks beautiful. That happened in my other quilt. Here, I'll show you the other one for people who didn't see it. This is the one I'm making now, and this is the one that I made last year, and it's got bigger blocks. They did not use this technique because the blocks are 10 inches and they have 1-inch strips, and it still isn't perfect. There's lots of wonkiness in this quilt, but I love it so much. Okay, hi Dawn from Republic, Washington. Hello, welcome. Everyone's welcome. Lurkers are welcome. People who chat and make comments and questions, you're welcome too. I love it all. I love everybody. I love feeling like we're all sewing together. Okay, so this is the quilt I made last year, and I love it. And it was very difficult. It took months and months to make, but I love it. And that inspired me to make a smaller one with smaller strips. And this is just a rendition of what it will hopefully look like. Hopefully it'll be even more beautiful. But this is just a rendition that I made with EQ8 quilt design software. Okay, so let's go back. Right now we are on the pressing table because I picked out this piece for the next strip for A18. So I'm folding back A18. And I'm just going to line it up. So this is this right here, these corners, it matters that these corners match up. This is off. This is already finished, and this is off the edge. So that doesn't matter too much. I could always trim it later, but you know, I don't love trimming. That's why I cut my pieces the right size, because I don't love trimming. Okay, so we've got our seam allowance. Everything's good here. Gonna move over to the sewing machine. Gonna sew this with a right next to the line of the paper, not worrying about the seam allowance anymore because I'm sewing right next to the fold of the paper. Okay, cut my thread. Okay, here we go. Push this back. I'm not worried too much about getting my iron touching the freezer paper anymore because my block is almost done. But I do still want it to stick. So press all that down. Okay, now we are on the last one, the last strip. And all of these seams are perfect. The outside is kind of wonky because I'm going to trim it. Oh, here we go. So aren't these seams like all perfect? And if I measured these seam allowances or these little strips, we've got half-inch strip, half-inch strip, half-inch, and then over here we've got 3/4 inch strip, 3/4 inch strip, 3/4 inch strip, all perfectly straight. This is why I'm using this technique. Yes, it takes a little bit longer, but I really care about this quilt, and it is less stressful for me to use this technique because it's easy to get it perfect. Yes, it takes a little more time, but it's easy to get it perfect. So it's just like, how do you feel about the quilt you're making? Are you just making it to give away at a charity and you don't care if it's perfect? Well, then don't use a time-consuming technique like this. But if you care and you don't want to stress about having it perfect and still haven't turned out perfect, that's why I'm using this technique. All right, we're already getting more spammers. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so let's go ahead with our last one. I got to pick out my last strip. Let's see here. I might have to repeat one. That's okay. I don't mind repeating as long as it's a fabric that I've used in the middle. So I don't want to repeat these. I don't really want to repeat these. This one I used here. Yes, I can totally repeat this one because I used it right here in the very middle. Okay, so I will put my strips away. And this is flat. I don't need to press it. Lay this right side up. Okay, I'm going to fold back the A19. And look here, my seam allowance is kind of tiny, but it's okay. If it's more than, it's okay. I've done worse, right? I've done worse. And this can be perfectly centered because we're going to trim away everything. I'm not worrying about what the seam allowances is on top. I'm just going to try and make so that the fabric on the bottom is 1/4 inch away from the fold of the paper. And then I will move to a sewing machine. And I'm going to sew this right next to the fold of the fabric. Okay, right next to the fold of the fabric. I'm not worrying anymore about seam allowances. If I sew it right next to the fold of, right next to the fold of the paper. If I sew this right next to the fold of the paper, that's where I carefully, when I started, I folded back my paper right along the line. So then I'm sewing right along the line where I want my strip to be totally straight. So now we go back to our pressing station. Okay, I can fold this back. Press it. Now my piece of freezer paper is almost completely covered. We got a little bit showing right here, but I'm going to trim that. Okay, we're all good. I've sewn all my strips on. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take away my pressing paper, which I use the pressing paper to keep my freezer paper clean so that keep all the little fuzzies that are on my mat and all the threads that might get caught there. I used it to keep the freezer paper clean because I'm going to reuse it. So now I'm going to go from the paper side. Because this is the first time I'm trimming this block, I have a nice dashed line here as the edges of my block because this is the first time I'm using this paper. But for my other papers that I have used several times previously, they've already been trimmed around that edge. So then I just put my ruler right here on the line of the previous, where the seam, the previous seam where I'm going to sew this to the next block and cut a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's how I will do it when I continue to use the same papers repeatedly. I just put my 1/4 inch of my ruler right there. Okay. But I made a new one for you guys today so that you could see this process from the very beginning. So luckily I have this cute little cutting mat. Can anyone guess where I got this adorable little cutting mat? And I will tell you, I did not pay very much for it. Not at all. Okay. So I'm just going to trim, and my little ruler isn't big enough to go all the way across, but that's okay. My cutting mat is big enough. So I'm gonna start cutting, and I need a new rotary blade. Ugh, embarrassing. Need to put in a new rotary blade. I could also do this with scissors. Okay. Has anyone guessed? Yes, Linda, I got it from the Dollar Tree. So it was $1.25. Everybody, rush to your Dollar Tree when we are done and see if your Dollar Tree has any of these, because it's such a handy cutting mat. I just had no idea how handy it would be. And I'm gonna do this twice because my rotary blade needs to be replaced. There we go. Okay, so I'm cutting along the dashed line. If the dashed line was already cut off, I would be placing this 1/4 inch seam allowance along the edge of the block, which leaves me a seam allowance to sew the blocks together. And see, this is why I made my strips a little bit wider than necessary so that I would have extra fabric to trim off and not worry. All right. Now is the big reveal that everyone needs to see. Everyone who has done traditional paper piecing, and you have to rip all those little papers off. And let me tell you, ripping all those little papers off is actually really stressful because sometimes you pull too hard on the seams and the seams pull out. And so pulling the papers off with traditional paper piecing, yes, a lot of people love it. And yes, it is good, but I like this method better because watch me pull this paper off. Okay, we've got paper on the back, no stitching on the paper. That's all. That's all. And now I have a perfectly square block. Look how beautiful that is. Perfectly square. It looks like I am a master piecer. But you all saw my seam allowances. I'm not a master piecer. I had wonky seam allowances. But because I was sewing right next to the fold of the paper, this block looks perfect. And now what I will do with it is I will turn on my big iron and I'll spray it a little bit with some best press, not a lot, but just a little bit of best press. And I will, and I'll flatten it, make sure it's nice and flat. And then I'll put it on my design wall behind me. And I'll let you see my design wall where I'm getting these done. I actually have one row above what you see there. So I have 6, 12, 13, 14, 15. I have 15. Now I have 16. I am halfway done, a little more than halfway done with my all blue blocks. Now, the next thing I want to show you is just a tip. Nobody taught me this tip, but I'm sure I'm not the first person to do it. So I have got my used piece, and I want to be able to use this as many times as possible. So first I'm going to just take some tweezers and just pull off the big threads, because the threads are what is going to make this not sticky for the next time I used it. And if you rewatch the beginning of this broadcast, it did take me, I don't know, at least 10 minutes to fold this paper and get it all ready. And so I don't have to repeat, so I can repeat that process as few times as possible. I'm going to do my best to remove all of the threads. And then, where is it? It fell down. Okay. So I had a piece of lint remover that was all pretty and all ready, but it fell behind my sewing table. I hate pulling this off. And probably the reason why is that my dog got a hold of it. So if I get a new, so that it's like nice and new without all this fuzz on it. This fuzz is on here because I was cleaning off my pressing mat so it looked better for you guys. So I have to, oh, here we go. This is what I'm doing. I'm pulling off the lint roller paper so that I can have a nice new one. Does anyone have a trick for doing this? Like, I love lint roller paper. I love lint rollers. They're just like so amazing. I use them all the time. I use them on my long arm when I have to unpick a whole bunch to remove the extra threads. I just love them, but like getting a new piece of paper off is so annoying. Okay, well, there we go. There we go. Okay. It's good enough. Good enough. Okay, so I did have one already, but it fell behind my sewing table and I can't get it. Okay, so this is the other trick that I have is when I am done picking off threads with the tweezers, then I just use my lint roller a little bit to see, and now it's nice and clean. And now it looks like the other ones that I've used a few times. I'll show you the other ones. Now it looks like my other ones that I've used a few times. Okay, and these can be reused. That's another huge benefit to this type of paper piecing is you can reuse your printed blocks. I've used them 4 times. I might be able to use them more than 4 times. If I'm really careful, I'm hoping I can use them 6 or 7 times. So we'll see. Okay, so now for people who joined in late, I'm going to start this whole process over, except not the folding part. If you want to see the folding part where I like crease along each line, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. I had to crease along each line before getting started. So I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to use 3 blocks and I'm going to show a chain piecing method. Okay. So this is how I chain piece while I'm working so that I can get more sewn at once. So I'm going to bring back all my envelopes, and my envelopes are all still in order because I just stacked them up. So here's all my envelopes of all my pieces. Okay, you can do this with a scrappy method. You can do this with just strips that like you cut the strips the width that you need, and then you can sew one on and trim off the extra and just use strips. But because I really care about this quilt, I cut all of my pieces and labeled them in an envelope. And I'm not usually such a persnickety quilter, not usually, but I really care about this quilt. Here, I'll show you one more time. So I really care about this paper, this quilt, and so I'm taking all the preparation steps. But also when I take all the preparation steps, it makes quilting less stressful for me. And I do have stress and anxiety, and I don't want to have that while I'm sewing. All right, Brenda says, I have been asked to teach this method at my guild. Okay, cool. Well, I'm so glad that I showed it to you. And I think you'll really love it. Like, I think you'll really love it. I don't think it takes any more time than traditional paper piecing, and it takes way less time at the end when you don't have to rip the little pieces off. Yes, Michelle said it might be my lint roller. Yeah, I probably have a really cheap lint roller. Okay. Oh, Liz reminding me that my rotary cutter is open. Close now. Thank you. Okay. Sharon says, thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for reading my blog. I love to know that people are reading it and enjoying it. Okay. So we're going to go right back to starting a new one. Well, a new 3. So now I'm going to show you my chain piecing method with this. I'm going to move all these tools out of the way because I won't need them for a minute. Okay. Put away all my tools over here. Okay. So now I'm going to do it on 3 at once. Okay. Now, if you remember, the first 2 we start with are the 2 tiny little squares, A1 and A2. And those are the same size, A1 and A2. So we've got 3. So I've got my envelope of, oh, hold on. We weren't seeing that big. So the first ones we start with are A1 and A2, the center of our log cabin block. And they're the tiniest little pieces. So I need 2 for this, 2 for this, and 2 for this. I'm going to get out my little envelope of tiny squares, and I'll pick out 2 for each one. So you get those 2, you get these 2, and you get this one and this one. And if they get folded up in your envelopes, that's okay because you have an iron right here. So this one did get folded up in the envelope. One thing you have to be careful of when you are chain piecing these, the only bad mistake I've made is I accidentally pressed when 2 of these were stuck together, pressed here when there was one of these underneath, and that was bad. That almost ruined a piece. So, and I want to keep these nice as long as possible because it's a little bit of work to fold them. So I'm going to set these 2 aside, and we'll start with 1. Okay, and we're just going to do, I'm going to put them up here. We're just going to do our A1, our first one. And for the first one, you put this wrong sides down. Okay, wrong sides down over your A1 square. And because I already cut it to the size it would be if I was regular piecing, I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. I don't have to be super accurate. Well, I want to try and be as accurate as I can about placing it in the center. So there's my A1. Okay. And then you fold back. The next one I want to do is my A2. So I'm going to fold back the line along A2. Okay, that's a scant seam allowance, but that's okay. I'm going to place this right on top, right sides together. And the seam allowance I'm trying for is I'm trying to have my piece underneath a 1/4 inch away from the fold on the paper. Okay, and that looks really good to me. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine. All right, and I'm just going to, for the tiny pieces like to get bunched up underneath. So the tiny pieces, I take my time. Okay, and now I'm just sewing all the way across right next to the fold on the paper. Okay, and I bring it back to my pressing station, and it looks like this. Okay, these were not placed together perfectly, and that's okay. That's why I love this technique. They're not placed together perfectly, but it's going to look perfect on the right side. So I will just fold this back over the A2 spot, finger press it a little bit, and press. Did that work out? Yeah. Press. I can see through the paper that my seam allowances around A2 are okay. I know it's hard for you to see through the paper, but I can see through the paper that my seam allowances around A2 are okay, either a 1/4 inch or scant 1/4 inch, or a little bigger than 1/4 inch. That's okay. So this one I'll set aside. Now I'm going to repeat that. This will be my A1 block. So I'm going to put it, I can see through the paper. So I'm going to put this over my A1 spot. Okay. Turn it over. I can see through the paper that it's still through the A1 spot, still under the A1 spot. So I'm going to press that so that it sticks. Okay. I'm using this piece. This is a really old piece of pressing paper. Oh my, look at this. I placed this one. It looks like I placed it right sides against the wax paper. Okay. It still looks good. I could leave that because in a quilt like this, no one's ever going to notice. But I'm pretty sure I placed this one right sides against the wax paper. So guess what? Ta-da! Let's peel it off. Use my little, I haven't sewn anything yet. Use my little tweezers. Yes, Judy, of course you can rewatch this later, and because I don't know if I'll get through all of these blocks before we stop, but I'm going to place this now right sides up, okay, right over the A1 spot, and press this. There we go. Okay, so now when I pull it off my pressing paper, it's right sides up. So then I will very carefully press it back. Right here is my line between A1 and A2, and this is my A2 piece. So I'm gonna pull it back right against that pre-folded line on the paper. Place this. So this seam allowance is a little bigger than, it's like a large 1/4 inch. That doesn't matter, but what I'm gonna try and do is place the one underneath so that it is 1/4 inch away from the fold on the paper. These are all dark blue, so then we're gonna move to my sewing machine, and these are the itty bitty pieces. I do have to take extra care when I'm doing the itty bitty pieces because they like to get folded up under next to the feed dogs. So I'm gonna start sewing. Oh, I'm gonna need to, my thread is shredding. Okay, I'm gonna sew this, but my thread is shredding here. So what I'm gonna do, you will get to watch me fix it. I'm gonna go ahead and cut my thread up on top of the sewing machine, pull it through. I just noticed right here that my thread is shredding. Yep. Okay, and I will rethread my sewing machine. I don't think the blocks that I've already made are going to be any worse off for it. So all I'm gonna do is just pull out the shredded part and rethread my sewing machine. Oh, that's not gonna work. Okay, so my sewing machine is rethreaded. All right, so now this one is already sewn. It looks fine. I'm gonna move over here to my pressing area. Okay, this seam allowance is not perfect, but who's gonna get perfect seam allowances when you're sewing with 1-inch blocks together? I mean, that's hard. Okay, that's why I'm using this paper. So I'm gonna fold this over. Okay. When you just have tiny pieces on your freezer paper, you do have to be careful that they don't come off. Once you get a lot of pieces sewn together, there's more to stick to the freezer paper and they don't come off. But those are done. Look how wonky they are, but it's not going to matter. You see that those are really wonky. The important thing is this seam right here is right here, right where I want it to be. So this seam is perfectly placed right here because I sewed right next to the fold in the paper. And so this block is going, so far I've sewn perfectly, even though it's so wonky. So far my sewing is perfect. So let's pick. This will be my A1. Here's the A1 spot. Okay, I'm going to place this right sides up right over the A1 spot. Center it as best as I can without stressing. I can see too that it's centered around A1 when I look at it through the paper. Press it so that my A1 piece is stuck to the paper. Now I'm going to sew my A2 piece. So I'm going to put my fingernail here and fold this back. This paper I've already used a few times, so the lines are well folded. Okay, so I'm going to place this right over it. My pieces are right sides together. They don't line up here because I'm worrying more about this piece, that the piece underneath is a 1/4 inch away from the fold. And let's see here, we need the sewing machine seam. Okay, so now I just have to be careful because I don't want these pieces underneath to get folded up as I carefully put it under my sewing machine. Sew across. Okay, we'll take a peek, see how they look. Look beautiful. So now I move over here to the pressing area. Okay, I'm going to fold this back. Finger press. Press it from the front of the paper. And there we go. All right. Did anyone just start watching now? Does anyone need further explanation? Let me put up my little reminder. Ask me anything. If anyone is just getting started watching and you want me to explain more what I'm doing, I am happy to do that. Okay, so now we've got 3 that are just started. I'm chain piecing this round. So now I've got my A3 envelope because the next one that I want, I've done A1 and A2. I need to do A3. So I'll fold that back and I need the piece that's going to go next right here. So what I do is I lay these out and I'm like, oh, my pieces just fell on the floor. Pieces, behave. Okay, so I lay these out and I'm thinking what's going to look good and not match. This one right here, because I have some kind of busy prints, I'm going to use this one that is, it's not a solid, but it's almost solid. And then this one I think could use a crazy looking piece. And this one already has one that's kind of a solid. So I'm going to try print there. This is all random. This is all random on purpose, which you know is really hard to do. But I cut up a lot of different fabrics for this, so my random on purpose is not that hard. Okay, so I'm going to set these 2 aside. I'm going to do this one first. So I lay the A3 piece right side up, and then I'm going to lay the current seam allowance down. All right. These edges don't have to match perfectly. I'm just trying to make this seam allowance a 1/4 inch away from the paper. And we've got a little bit bigger pieces now, so it's starting to get a little bit easier. It gets easier and easier the bigger pieces you use. Isn't that true with all quilting? Okay, so place this here. Sew across. Cut. Let's see, make sure nothing got folded up. Nothing got folded up or anything. So I'm just going to set this aside and I'm going to press this in a minute. So I'll press them all together. So this is the next one. We want A3. Okay. Fold this back along A3. A3 is going to be right side up. Place it together. Okay, move to my sewing machine. And then I'm going to sew as close to the fold of the paper as I can without sewing on the paper. And I'm going to check to make sure that nothing got twisted or folded up underneath. It didn't. So this is my next one. Just set it aside because I'm chain piecing. This one, place it right side up. Okay. Fold back along A3. The lines on my freezer paper have all been already pre-creased, pre-folded and pre-creased, especially these because I'm reusing these for at least the 2nd time, if not the 3rd or 4th time, which is something I love about this process because I can reuse my papers as long as I keep the fuzz off them as much as I can. I can reuse them again and again. Sewing right next to the fold of the paper. Cut. I'm going to turn on some music. How about some music? Let's just see. I have never done a live stream and played music at the same time. So first of all, you're going to have tell me if you can even hear it and if it needs to be louder or quieter, and tell me if you can even hear the music. I can hear the music in my headphones. It's not too loud to be distracting, but hey, we're trying new things, right? Live streaming is new to me. All right, so we've got a little bit of music on. Okay, so now it is time for us to prep these for their next piece for A4. So what I'm going to do is fold this back over the little A3 spot. Okay, I'm going to fold this back and finger press it. I can see that it covers the A3 spot all the way. The seam allowances are not straight, but seam allowances are hard to get straight with tiny pieces. And as long as it covers it by a scant 1/4 inch or more than a 1/4 inch, we're good. So there's one with 3 pieces on it. Then Lori has to leave. Thank you for coming, Lori. Thank you everybody for coming. I love sewing with friends. Okay, so I just finger press this back over the A3 spot. Press it all down. I think one of the reasons why our paper continues to stick to our fabric is because we're pressing it again and again and again. So everything continues to stick. I'm just removing some extra threads here. I'm being just a tiny bit OCD. I'm not usually OCD with my quilting, only with quilts that I love. And I'm gonna love this one. You can see in that tiny little window what it's gonna look like. Okay, so there's that ready to go. And fold this back, finger pressed. Okay. We're going to. All right. So now we have all of our A3 strips sewn on, and now I'm going to go for my A4 strips. So here's my envelope that's labeled A4. I also put the size of the strip on in case I run out. I can cut myself some more. And I put the little B here because it's blue. That's how I organized. So let's pick some that will look good. This will look good with that. This will look good with that. And that already used. This will look good with that. Okay. I move my A4 envelope out of the way. I'll stack these up over here so that I can work one at a time. So I'll place this right side up. I'm working on A4 spot. So I want to crease along this line that's between what I've already done and between my A4 spot. There we go. Place these right sides together. Seam allowance doesn't matter so much as long as I try and get the piece underneath to be a 1/4 inch away from the folds on the paper. So I'm going to move over here. Okay, my pieces are getting a little bit bigger, so it's a little bit easier to sew them. I just want to make sure nothing gets folded up underneath. Okay, I am using some 60 weight thread on the top and the bottom because 60 weight thread doesn't add any bulk to your seam allowance. So I really love using 60 weight thread for piecing. So look at that. Look how nice it's looking. Doesn't matter that it looks wonky around the edges. We don't care that this part looks wonky. What we care about is that these seams are perfectly straight, and they are because we sewed right next to the lines. We sewed right next to the folds on the paper. So our seams look perfectly straight, and we are not, oh, hey, sorry, you need to remind me. Okay, so the first one's done. We don't care that these edges are all wonky. We really only care that these lines right here are perfectly straight. And they are because we're sewing right next to the fold of the paper. So here's our next one. We got one layer of fabric. Place that right side up. Then this is A3. Right here we've got A3. I'm going to fold back. Oh, no. Oh, we're on A4. Thank you. We're on A4. Fold back. Okay, it exposes a seam allowance. This is a wide seam allowance. Does that matter? No. Just gonna place this down so that the one underneath has the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so then I'll move over to my sewing machine. Sew straight across, right next to the paper. That's what makes my seam so perfectly straight and perfect, is because I'm sewing right next to the paper. Okay, we can look underneath and see that I've sewn right next to the paper. Okay, back here. This one looks good. I'm not going to press that till after I do this one. Place this one right side up. Now the reason why I'm using this pressing paper, you can see this pressing paper is super old. I've been using it for years. You can also use an applique pressing mat that your iron and nothing will stick to. A4, I'm using that so that it will help keep this clean and help keep my paper from picking up the fuzz that's on my pressing mat. So just place this, center it, and try and make a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the bottom. The top doesn't matter, it's already sewn. All right. And go ahead, sew across it, close to the paper. All right. Does anybody want to see Lola? I think I need to take a Lola break. Okay, so I'm just going to finger press this. I think I need a Lola break. I need some support for my emotional support dog. Here we go. Fold this back, finger press. Look how nice and straight these seams are. Oh, do you see it all? Okay, these seams are nice and straight. And I've got A4 sewn to 3 blocks, and now I need to sew A5, but I'm going to take a little break to have some soda. All right, and then I'm going to hold Lola. Lola, you can't see her, but she's actually on a little stool right here. She's my little emotional support dog and my little sewing companion. Are you guys dog lovers too? This is my Lola. Are you doing okay? Are you doing okay, baby? All right. Hi, Michelle. Yes, this is Lola. I'm so glad you guys are enjoying this. Bye, Lori. All right. So, Lola really needs to be groomed. Yeah, next week. Our next live stream will be Tuesday night at 8 p.m. and Lola will be groomed on Tuesday morning, so she's going to be all beautiful if you want to come just to see Lola. Back on her little stool. Okay, let's go back to work. If enough people stay, I might finish these 3 blocks, but that's the most I'm doing. So if you want to see me continue with this process, so now I'm back to my, this is here for, this is scrap. Okay, so now the next one we're on is A5. So let's pick out some A5 strips that look like they will look good with what I already have sewn. So I don't want to do this one here because I already sewed this fabric on here, but it'll look good here. Ooh, I only have a few of that. That'll be cute. And here, oh, I already did the sprinkles, but I haven't done this one. There we go. Oh, it fell on the floor. Okay, so I'm done with my A5 envelope. I'm going to put it over here on the other side of my sewing machine. And let's start with this one. This cute texty print. This was a Riley Blake print. Okay, so now I'm doing A5. So I'm going to crease the line that's next to what I've already sewn in A5. That's kind of a scant seam allowance, so I'm going to try and get this a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance right here. And as you see, like the more I do, the faster this block gets, because the faster it comes together is because you're sewing a little bit longer seam every time. So sew that, cut it. Now I'm just going to leave that there. I'm going to come down here, and here's my next one. Make it nice and flat. So this is A5. And I'm going to fold back along A5. And look, I have a wide seam allowance here. I'm just gonna place this on top and try and make it a careful 1/4 inch seam allowance, because what matters is that this bottom block is a 1/4 inch away from the paper. And that looks good. So I'm gonna come back over here. Now I'm speeding up a little bit to show you the actual speed that I sew these when I'm alone. Okay, sew across right next to the paper. Okay, and just move this aside for now, because I'm coming back here. Hi, Javina from Columbus, Ohio. Hi, Judy. I'm so glad you love this technique. All right, and Dawn. Oh, Dawn has a black lab. Okay, I knew you guys would love to see Lola. I love Lola. Okay, so this is our last A5. I'm gonna go here, fold back along A5. Javina doesn't have an embroidery machine. Well, you still might like to watch us embroider, but that might get dangerous because then you might buy an embroidery machine. Okay, so I'm noticing that this one is a little bit too long. I'm going to trim off a little bit. It's still a little bit too long. I don't want this one, I don't know what happened to this one. This one I didn't cut properly. I don't want to have too much extra fabric under here because then I'll have to trim it. All right, looks good. I'm going to have a scant seam allowance. I just want to make sure I have enough. And I'm going to go ahead and show you my sewing machine. Carefully sew right next to the paper. I might have trimmed off a little too much there. Hopefully we can make it work. Okay, so now I'm going to take all 3 pieces back over here, my pressing station, and we're going to press them. So here's the first one. Fold this back, finger press the crease, press it back. I can see through the paper that it completely fills my A5 block, so that's good. Then this one, finger crease it. I can tell it completely fills my A5 block, and that's all that matters. I'm not worrying very much about what the outside of this looks like because I sewed right next to the paper, all of these like seams are so perfectly straight that only the seam allowances are wonky. Okay, I might have trimmed a little bit too much off this one, but I think it'll be okay. I'll make it work. Make it work. It's going to be really scant seam allowances when I sew on A9, but I'll manage it. All right, getting thirsty. Okay, I'm chain piecing my blocks here. Now I need to find an A6 piece that looks good with all of these. So I've got my A6 envelope out. I think that one will look good. This one I'm not going to use because I already used it there and I used it there, so I'll use it later. Let's see what else we have in here. Oh, that one will look good, and this one will look good. It's random on purpose. Random on purpose is harder than random. Okay, so set these aside, and I'll start with this one. I'm going a little faster now. Okay, so place this right side up, and this is piece A6. So I find the A6 strip, fold this back, place them right sides together. Okay, move over to my sewing machine. And I'm going to sew. Set this aside. I'm going to bring this piece up here and do it up here. Okay, so I'm going to place the A6 strip right side up. I'm going to find my A6 fold line right here and place this right on top. There we go. Now I'm really going fast. Okay, got my A6 for my third block. I'm going to fold back along the A6 line. And feel the seam allowance. Place those right sides together. The only thing I have to be careful of now that I'm going faster is I need to be careful that I don't sew on the paper. It's not the end of the world if you sew on the paper, but we want to make these papers last as long as possible so I can get as many blocks made with the same papers as possible. All right, so I'm gonna fold this back so that it covers, this is the A6 square right here. Oh, hold on. So this is the A6 square right here. I'm gonna fold this back so it completely covers the A6 square, hopefully with a good seam allowance. Doesn't have to be perfect 1/4 inch, but good enough. Okay, so this one is ready. Fold this back and finger press. And press it. Oh, I almost pressed those together. That would not be a good idea. And then fold this one back, finger crease, and press it. Okay. All right, now let's pick 3 more fabrics for our next strip. The next strip is A7, which is this one. It's gonna go right here. So I line these up and I'm like, okay, what's gonna look good on these 3 spots? Let's see here. I haven't used this one yet here. That will look good. I haven't used this one yet here, and I haven't used this one yet. Easy peasy. All right, set these 2 aside. Place this one. Isn't that pretty? Oh, that's a really pretty Rifle Paper Company print. Really old one. I think it's Secret Garden or something like that. Really pretty. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Yes, often we do have to watch things over. We have to do things once you do this. So Michelle says it's really helpful to watch this over and over again. And once you do it, once you actually do it a few times, then it will really sink in. So there we go. You can use this with any paper piecing pattern. So now just go to Etsy and find a really cute paper piecing pattern. Somebody, I haven't tried it yet, but somebody has a really beautiful butterfly paper piecing pattern on Etsy that I love. But you can use any paper piecing pattern with this technique. Just make sure that you print on freezer paper. Don't print on regular paper or paper piecing paper. Make sure you print on freezer paper. And then you can use any paper piecing pattern. Actually, I have a really easy paper piecing pattern on my website. If you go to my website and in the search bar, if you search for butterfly, it will come up. It's a little mini quilt. I think I named it, it was a few years ago, I think I named it Wild Summer Creature or something like that. If you search for that, that is a super, super easy. Oh, look how wonky this is. Okay. Change subject. Look how wonky that is. Do I have to unpick it? I think not, because look, even though this is super wonky seam, look how wonky. Look at my wonky seam. Okay. Even though that seam is super wonky, when I fold this back, it covers the line for the next stitching line. Right here, it only covers by like just a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. Here it covers by 1/4 inch. I'm not gonna unpick that because occasionally I'm okay with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave that. All right, so here's the next one. We're on A7, so I'm going to fold back the line next to A7. Oh, look, this one. I'll fold it over. I want my pieces to be nice and flat before I use them. So, right sides up, right sides down. Okay. Now I'll go to my sewing machine. Okay, I can't remember what I was talking about. Oh, so if you want to try this on a very easy pattern, if you want to try this technique, go to socantsheet.com and in the search bar type in wild summer creature or butterfly. You'll see it's a really cute looking butterfly mini quilt, and it only has like 5 pieces, maybe more than 5, but super easy, and just printed on some not regular foundation piecing paper, but on some wax paper. This is Carol Doak's wax paper. You can use any wax paper. You can use wax paper from the grocery store. The reason why I bought Carol Doak's wax paper is because it's already pre-cut into the right size for your printer. And I just didn't want to go through all of the mess of cutting it. And don't use it in a laser printer. Use it in a inkjet printer, which is what most people have anyway. Okay, switch to the sewing machine. And I'm just gonna sew this. That I don't like that seam allowance. That's gonna be too big right there. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit smaller. Sometimes the pieces start to come away from the paper, but in just a moment, you're going to press them to the paper again. So this really works. This really works, and it helps you make perfect blocks. Okay, so we've got all 3 pieces sewn in this chain piecing method. I'm going to push this back. Look how straight my little seams are. Okay. Oh, and I already pressed these. So now I'm ready for A8. And A8 is going to go right here. So I'm going to lay these all out so that I know I'm going to put A8 in all these 3 spots. And I'll open my little A8 envelope. Okay. These are how many blocks I have left to make. So this one will look good here. This one will look good here. It's not cute. Let's see here. I think this one will look good here. I can have an almost solid one. This almost solid is actually a different color than this almost solid. Yeah, I have a lot of fabric. It came out of a fat quarter bottle. A lot of these are scraps that I cut up. That's why I have so many different prints. Okay, so we'll do this one first. Right side up. We're working on A8. Hold it back. Right sides together. The one on the bottom is going to try and have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to sew right here. Okay. Now we go to the next one. Place this right side up. Fold along the A8 line. That's a huge seam allowance. So I'm going to overlap that a little bit. Okay. The fabric on the top overlaps the fabric on the bottom. So the fabric on the bottom hopefully has something similar to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this. Okay, now going over here to get the 3rd one. Here's my A8 piece. Fold back, place them right sides together. Move to my sewing machine. All right, now let's inspect. Let's see if I did a good job. 1, 2, 3. That looks nice. Finger press. All right, that looks beautiful. It's going faster now that the pieces are bigger. Now I could trim those, seam allowances, so they were the same, but why bother? Nobody's gonna see it. Nobody's gonna see it. It's inside my quilt. Okay, that looks beautiful. SA8. Oh, I'm doing a good job now. Seam allowances are nice. The nice thing about this is no one's going to see your seam allowances except you. And then it's going to be on the inside of your quilt. And the only thing that matters is how straight and perfect these are. And they are all. So my next one is A9. A9 is right here, and right here. So let's pick out some A9 pieces. Okay. Okay, so I'm making this kind of random on purpose. I just want A9 pieces, hopefully, that I haven't used yet, but I don't have very many A9 pieces. Wow, I have a ton of this. I better use this. I've got that. That matches, but it's okay. I haven't used this one here, and I haven't used this one here. So towards the end, I might have to cut more if I want more randomness, or I'll just have to not worry about it. I'd rather not worry about it. Okay, so we'll start with this one. Place our A9 right side up. Fold back the line of A9. Okay, I forgot these. Look how big, I made this too big. There are some that I cut all of them too big. See how easy this was? I did not need a rotary cutter or anything. I just used my scissors because this is such a stress-free method. I think that's why I love it. It's so stress-free. Okay, does our sound still good, people? Okay. There might be something going on with my sound connection. Okay, here we go. Sewing right next to the paper. Then I'll go to my next one down here. And I'm gonna put A9 right side up. Okay, this is where I have my itty bitty seam allowance because I sewed the one before. It's super wonky, which you can't see anymore, but I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm gonna have a little more than 1/8 of an inch seam allowance right there in that little strip right there, and I'm gonna be okay with that. Because this is my stress-free piecing method. I am piecing tiny 1/2 inch log cabins, and because of this freezer paper technique, I am not even stressing. I love it. Okay, so now back to my last one, my third one, right side up. Fold back on the A9 line, sides together. That's going to be a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance. I can tell already. Yeah. Here we go. Okay, so let's go back to our pressing area and inspect. Fold this back. Oh, very nice. Fold this back. This one's almost black, but I love it. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be so beautiful. Can you guys see the quilt that I'm making? I'll show you again. This is the quilt that I'm making. It is all made of 6-inch log cabin blocks, and my 6-inch log cabin blocks are, so right now I'm working on the ones that are all blue, so that's why I'm only using blue strips, but I'm also going to use some orange and hot pink and dark turquoise and light turquoise. So this is the end goal. And I also put in a paper piece border, if you can see that. Because I thought that border with the light fabrics looks a lot like, kind of like crochet or lace or something. And I just thought that would be so beautiful to put that paper piece border around it. So the whole thing is going to be paper pieced, even the border. And this might not be done for a long, long time. Or chances are I'm going to be coming up here to my sewing room when I can't sleep and working on this. So those are going to be unscheduled live streams, which I will only stream on Twitch. So these if you want to come and join me on my unscheduled live streams that are like totally just random sewing at random hours because I'm working on something and I want to talk to you, go ahead and sign up for a Twitch account and follow me on Twitch so you'll get notifications when I'm doing my unscheduled let's just sew and chat together, because I've got a lot of these blocks to make. I've got 81 total, plus I think there were like 120 border blocks or something like that, but they're really tiny. They hopefully will be fast. So all of my other live streams where I'm showing you different things, if they're planned, I will live stream them to Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. But if you want to see my unscheduled live streams, then make sure that you follow me on Twitch so that, you know, if you happen to be sewing and I happen to be sewing, we can sew together. All right. What was I doing? Okay. Clay. Hi. Okay. So I'm already halfway through these blocks and I'm chain piecing, but at the very beginning of this stream, you're on Twitch. So after we're done, you can go ahead and rewatch this. It'll be available for 7 days. You can rewatch it from the beginning, where I started at the very beginning, and I started with folding the paper, and then I started at the beginning of the block and did one all the way through and trimmed the block. Now I'm showing a little more advanced method of chain piecing. So I'm making 3 blocks at once, which is how I usually do this. So I'll sit down and I can do 3 blocks in about an hour. So when I have about an hour, I'll sit down and do 3 blocks. And oh, hi, Megan. Hi, Megan. Nice to meet you. I love having followers on Twitch, because Twitch is where I'm going to do my just chatting live streams, where I don't necessarily have a technique in mind where I'm going to work on and teach you guys. I'm just going to be working on what I'm working on, and we can sew together. Turn on your iPad, put it right next to your sewing machine, and we'll sew together. You know, my sister and I have done that with FaceTime before, and we do it, it's been a while, but we used to do it on Sunday evenings, where she'd put on her iPad and I'd put on my iPad, and we would FaceTime sew together, and it's so much fun. So I want to do that with you guys on Twitch, but those are going to be unscheduled, unplanned, and so if you follow me on Twitch, you will get a notification of when that is going to happen. So, and yes, you can also rewatch, because I don't have a lot of Twitch followers yet. My streams are only saved for 7 days, but hopefully that will change, and then the streams will be available for longer. Okay, so now we're going to do A10. This is my A10 strip. So if I look here, here's my A10 strip. So it's going to be right here. Get them all set up so I know where I'm putting them. A10 is right here. 10 is right here. So then I just get my little pre-cut strips out, and I go, this one will look nice. And I just used that one there, but it will look nice over here. And let's see here. Where's one I haven't used yet? I haven't used this one, this block yet. So that will go there. So I'm just going to keep on going. Okay, so these two I'm going to set aside so I don't get anything mixed up, right? Now I'm going to take this, put my A10. What am I working on? Okay, I'm working on A10. Okay, I have to look at the envelope. A10 right side up. Here's the line between what I've done and A10. So I fold my paper back, lace it over. The only one with the seam allowance that matters is the strip on the bottom. I want to try and keep the strip on the bottom a 1/4 inch away from the fold on the paper. Nice to meet you. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to my sewing machine here. I've got my pieces. Turn it over and I'm going to sew right next to fold on the paper. I try really hard not to sew on the paper because if I sew on the paper, then I might damage the paper, and I want to use these papers as much as possible. Here's my next one. 10 right sides together. That looks good. So right next to the fold on the paper. Leave that for a second while I get my third one. Okay, just watching that I want this strip to be a 1/4 inch away from the fold on the paper. That's the only seam allowance that I'm worried about, that I'm even thinking about right now. Because these strips are all pre-cut. I pre-cut all my strips as if I wasn't paper piecing. So they are the strips with they have a 1/4 inch seam allowance built in. So so I have that 1/4 inch wiggle room. My seam allowances are not perfect, but I cut the strips as if I was using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that's what's built in. Then I can kind of just have an average of a 1/4 inch seam allowance as I work. I'm folding this back over the A10 spot. There we go. Beautiful. That's kind of a lot. Look how that is. I don't like how much that is. I'm gonna just turn it. That's not necessary. Nobody's going to see that. That's on the back of the quilt. Sometimes I get a little OCD. All right. So far, so beautiful. So far, so beautiful. Now, look. This is what I'm looking at when I say so far, so beautiful. Okay. All of this wonkiness around the edge of the block, that is going to go away. What I love and what is beautiful is that all of these seams are perfectly straight. I can even pull out my little ruler and I can measure the ones that are already finished. So this strip is already finished. It's a 1/2 inch. That's already finished. 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. All of my little 1/2 inch strips, which is really hard. It's really hard to sew 1/2 inch strips, 1/2 inch pieces, right? I mean, it started as an inch and after it's sewn in, it's 1/2 inch. That's really hard to do, but it's perfect because of this method. And this is supposed to be 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch. This one, what other one? This one is supposed to be 3/4 of an inch. Look at that, 3/4 of an inch. It's perfect, and I'm not stressing. Normally, if I was trying to make these total tiny 6-inch blocks, it's a 6-inch block with 19 pieces, okay? If I was normally trying to make a 6-inch block, here, look at my face. If I was trying to make a 6-inch block with 19 pieces, I would be stressed out of my mind. I would be unpicking and trying to make it all perfect so it wouldn't end up totally wonky. And that's the reason why I chose this method. You're not going to choose this method for all your quilt blocks, but I chose this method because I'm trying to squeeze 19 pieces into a 6-inch block, and I don't want it to end up totally wonky. Okay, that's why that's why I'm using this method. So I'm going to take a little drink and keep going. So now we're on piece A11. That's a scrap. Okay, so let's find A11. It's right here. So this is where it's going to go. I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go right here. So I have my little envelope of A11 pieces. And let's see. Oh, did this come out of the envelope? Yeah. So this can go here. That will look pretty. This one I'm not going to use because I have it right here. Let's see if it'll work on this one. No, these two are too similar. Oh, hello. Okay. So this one I picked out. That's going to look pretty. I don't want to use it on this block because I already have that one. And this one is like really similar to that. So I don't want to use that. Let's see what we have next. Haven't used this one yet. That will be pretty. And over here, I only used this one in the very center, so that would be pretty, but I don't have any like almost solid pieces. Like this is not solid, but this is very solid looking like linen print. So I think that will be nice there because I don't have anything that's close to solid yet in that one. So put these away. Back in my stack. I'm stacking my envelopes, just so you know. I'm restacking my envelopes with the open side up so they're all still in order. So when I go to like restart again, here's my A1, A2. And then I have my A3, A4, A5. All my envelopes are in the right order. So when I go to start over again, I can just start over again and all my envelopes are in the right order. And it doesn't matter which order I sew these in. I'm just doing 3 at a time chain piece. Now this piece is not very flat. Make him flat. Okay, so we are on A11. So I put my A11 piece right side up. I'm going to fold back along the line with A11 and what I've already sewn. Okay, place this down. Move to my sewing machine. Now that I am sewing longer seams, it's actually going faster than it was before. I'm sewing more fabric on every time. Okay. Then I will come back down my pressing area. Okay, this one right side up. Press, fold back along the A11 line. Place them right sides together. Back to my sewing machine. Sewing right next to the paper. I don't want to sew on the paper. I'm sewing right next to the paper. Now I'm going to show you something that might happen, okay? I'm going to show you a mistake that might happen and how you can fix it without unpicking. I love the mistakes that I can fix without unpicking. So here's my little A11 piece. I'm going to place these right sides together. This one has a really skinny seam allowance. I think we talked about that. It's okay because the piece underneath is right. Okay, so here I'm going to fix one of those mistakes. I'm going to show you a mistake on purpose and then I'm going to fix it. So say that you're sewing next to the paper and you get distracted, singing along and dancing at your sewing machine and you go, ooh, did you see what I did? I sewed away from the seam allowance and then I came back and now I'm like right next to the fold of the paper again. But because I was singing and dancing while I was sewing, right here I came way away from the fold of the paper. If you can't, I don't know if you can see that, but I went like, woohoo, because I was singing and dancing and sewing at the same time. So I'm going to fix that. All I need to do is sew one more time and so fix it and sew right next to the fold of the paper. And that other seam where I was singing and sewing and dancing doesn't matter. Okay, so let's look at it down here at the pressing board and you'll see that it's okay. So back on my pressing mat, if you can see right here, this is where I was like, woohoo, singing and dancing. But because I re-sewed it, let's see here. See where I have this curved line is where I left the freezer paper, but then I went back and I just sewed next to the freezer paper. So look at that. It's not going to matter at all. Woohoo! Listening to music while we sew, we can even sing and sew at the same time, and it is okay. This method is so stress-free. Okay. This one is done. Hi, Judy from Indiana. Nice to meet you. We are doing the freezer paper foundation piecing where we are not actually sewing our fabric to the paper, so we can reuse the papers again and again. Okay, so I'm on piece A12. I can tell by the envelope. We can go here and find where piece A12 is. It's right here. Right here. It's going to be right here and right here. So here are my randomized scrappy strips. And I'm going to put this one here. Looks good. I think I'll reuse this one here. I used it here in the center, and that's okay. I'll reuse it here. And then this one, I think will look good there. Or should I use this really dark one? I love this really dark fabric. I think I'll use that. I'm gonna run out of that soon because I put it in almost all my blocks. Okay, so I'm gonna put my A11 strips or A12 strips back in the envelope and put it in the pile. And now stack these up and I'll work one at a time. Okay, so I'm gonna put my strip right side up. Then I'm working on A12, so I'll crease back my paper along that line. It's already pre-creased, and also I've already used this at least one time, maybe 3 or 4 times. So I can reuse the paper. I love that. Okay, so these are right sides together. Move to my sewing machine. So right next to the fold of the fabric. I have a tiny seam allowance right here, but I can deal with it. Okay, go to get my next one. Place this right side up. Oh, it's got a little fold in the fabric. Nice and flat. Okay, this is A12. So I'll fold back next to A12. Because I want to reuse these pieces, I am trying to not get threads stuck to my freezer paper. Just because I want to reuse them. All right, so these go right sides together. Okay. Back to the sewing machine. Okay, and now back to this one. I don't want to rush. I need to tell myself to slow down and don't rush. I mean, I really want to get these 3 blocks done. Woohoo! That means I got 4 blocks done today. But when we rush, that's when we maybe make mistakes. So don't rush, Caroline. Okay, back to the sewing machine. And go. Sew all the way across right next to the fold in the paper. Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Anyone who's just starting us, do you have any questions about this technique? This is freezer paper, not regular foundation paper, foundation quilting paper. This is freezer paper which is why my fabric is just sticking to it instead of me having to sew the fabric to the paper, which is wonderful, because then when it comes time for me to pull these off, you're gonna love what a miracle it is, how easy it is to pull these off. Oh, okay, so you can see right here I stitched on the paper a tiny bit, but didn't really make it. Oh, that was previously. Yeah, that was long. That was another day. Another day, another block. Okay, that one looks beautiful. Okay, now I'm on piece A13. So I'm going to find it right there. A13 is on that side. A13, A13, my little A13 envelope. And let's find some pieces. Will look good. Let's see here. I have not used this one here. Use that one there. I think I already used that one right there. I haven't used that one. Or should I see what I have underneath? Oh, I haven't used this one in a long time. That was scrappy fabric. Let's use that. Okay. Put away all of my A13 strips back in their envelope and back on the pile for me to use later. I'm going to set these to a side. We'll work with this one. All of these are kind of folded up because they were such big strips in the envelope, they got folded. So, right side up. Place these right sides together. Here we go. Over to the sewing machine. In case you notice, this stress-free technique means don't worry about your seam allowances. All my pieces are cut as if I had a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but now that I'm actually sewing them, I try to just average my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this one's kind of big, so I'm going to put the piece underneath a little bit down. The only one that matters is the one that hasn't sewn yet. So I'm trying to make this piece so that it's a 1/4 inch away from the edges of the paper there. You guys are so wonderful. You don't complain. You see me make mistakes. Man, I love quilters. Quilters are my people. Okay, so here's our third one. Just gonna get it flat a little bit with my little iron. I love setting up a little pressing station next to my sewing machine. Of course, I have a big iron and a big ironing board, but I love having a little pressing station right next to it, especially when I'm doing stuff like this, so I don't have to get up all the time. All right. Let's look at the sewing machine. Right. Go back to pressing station, inspect, see how they are. Okay, pressing it back. Oh, that looks beautiful. I'm not looking to see, what I'm looking at here when I say it looks beautiful is I see that I can see underneath where the edges of this little piece should be, and my fabric covers all the edges by about a 1/4 inch. So that means that it'll be easy, that my seam allowances are going to be okay. Nothing's going to come undone. I'm not going to have holes in my quilt. Okay, so that's done. Let's check out this one. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Not going to have any holes in my quilt. Now right here, I'm going to have a scant seam allowance, but scant seam allowances are okay. I sew with those on purpose all the time. So There we go. That looks beautiful. Make it all keep sticking to the freezer paper because we're not done yet. Okay, here's the mistake that I made the other day. I accidentally pressed my freezer papers together, but they were okay. All right, let's see how this one looks. Beautiful. And I can see through my white paper here that my seam allowances are all going to be at least a 1/4 inch. So it's wonderful. Okay, let's pick out our A14 pieces. First, let's see where A14 is going to go. A14 is going to be a skinny strip. It's going to go right there. A14 is going to go right there, and it's going to go right there. So open up my little A14 envelope. I've got a lot of strips in here. That I don't want that there, look, because it's got the same print right there. I don't really want that there, but I haven't used this print in this block, so I use that one there. Let's see here. I've been using this one too much. I don't want this one. Oh, I haven't used this one at all. Use this one here. That will look good. And, oh, look, I haven't used this one yet. Use this one here. Now, because I don't have, each of these little blocks has 19 strips, and I don't think I cut 19 different fabrics. So there will be some repeats in each block, but I don't want the repeats to be next to each other. So let's do this one first. Flatten my little strip a little bit. Okay, here's the A14 where we are. We're on A14. I'm going to press this back, reveal the seam allowance, and place these right sides together. Okay, and then I'm going to move to the sewing machine. Go. Right next to the edge of the paper without sewing on the paper. So here's my next one. Fold it back along the A14 line, and it's easy to do that because I've already used these papers several times, and before I used them for the first time, I creased all my lines. Okay, so now we're just going to all right, I want to remind everybody, you can ask me anything. This is fun for us to sew together. Okay, and I will watch the comments and respond to them. I absolutely can. Okay, so here's my last one, my last A14. Here's the A14 line. Fold it back. Place these right sides together. Okay, the edges don't have to line up perfectly. What I'm trying to get here is I'm trying to make sure that this strip that's on the bottom is going to be a 1/4 inch away from the fold of the paper. That's all I'm trying for. This method is so wonderfully stress-free. You don't have to worry about getting perfect seam allowances, just approximate. So now get all my pieces. I'll come down here and I'll look at them and press them. So put that back. That looks beautiful. Now my piece, the fabric that's stuck to the freezer paper is getting big enough that I don't have to worry so much about my iron touching the waxy sides of the freezer paper. Oh, look how wonky that seam is. Look at that, okay? That's like so wonky. We've got a scant 1/4 inch here and a huge 1/4 inch there. But when I fold it over, the entire piece is going to fit and cover the spot by more than a 1/4 inch or by a 1/4 inch. So that's just fine. Look, it doesn't look wonky here. In fact, look, it doesn't look wonky here, but I've got a perfect 1/4 inch piece or perfect 1/2 inch strip. That's why I love this technique. Because, yes, there's all these steps, and I have to buy the paper, which this is Carol Doak's paper, by the way. I got it on Amazon. Or you could just use freezer paper from the grocery store, but then you have to cut your pieces to fit the printer, or trace them, or trace the design. But I just love this technique because I am not stressing and listening to music. I could be watching a TV show. Once you like do this a few times, you don't even really have to pay super close attention. Well, I mean, you do. You always want to pay super close attention so you don't sew your finger. But it's stress-free piecing of itty-bitty pieces. Stress-free piecing 6-inch blocks with 19 pieces. Tell me if you've ever had a stress-free time with that before. Okay, it looks like we are almost to our last round. Right now we're on A15. I'm just gonna go right there. So let's get set up for A15, A15, A15 here. So let's get out some A15 strips. This one could definitely go there. This one could go there. It matches with the center, but that's okay. What should we put on this one? What should we put on this one? Oh, you know, this one doesn't have very many that are like solid or almost solid. It does match this one. Oh, indecision. I guess I could use this one. Yeah, use that one. Okay. All right, put my A15 envelope away. Okay, so place the strip right side up, A15 line, right sides together. Move to the sewing machine. I'm gonna sew right. Oh, maybe I sewed on the paper there because I was going fast. We'll have to see, but I don't think it's bad. Okay, this one right side up. A15 line. Now that is a huge seam allowance. Look at that, but it's okay because that's already sewn. I just want to make sure that I don't make the next piece have a huge seam allowance. So I'm placing the next piece. Oh, I'm placing the next piece because right here, look at that huge seam allowance. I'm placing the next piece so that it's just a 1/4 inch or a scant 1/4 inch away from the fold on the paper, so that I don't repeat that huge seam allowance right there. So here we go. Now, that's one of the places where I kind of like wobbled away from the edge of the paper. Right here, I wobbled away from the edge of the paper. So what I'm going to do is just sew again. And this time be more careful to be right next to the edge of the paper. No unpicking required. Okay, so here's my third one. Piece right sides up. Okay, along the A15 line. Right sides together. I really love sewing. Sewing is my happy place. I'm really excited for this quilt. I mean, it's going to be a long, long time before I finish the quilt. But now I'm going to have like more than half of my all blue blocks done. So sometime when I'm sewing in the middle of the night, when you follow me on Twitch, you'll turn on Twitch and you'll see me, and I will be sewing these blocks, but different colors finally. Because I told myself I had to get all the all blue blocks done first. Okay. Look, it really doesn't matter how wonky that is. It really doesn't matter because it covers the seam allowance, and the next one is going to be perfectly straight. That's why this method is so good for piecing little pieces with no stress. Because it's going to turn out perfect, even though my seams are not perfect. Okay, so this one, fold it back. And this is kind of wonky too, but it covers, I can see through the paper that it's going to cover the seam allowance for the next block. It's going to cover the seam for the next block. So it's fine. It's fine. It's all good. Okay, so all we have left, friends, is to sew our last 4 strips around the outside of the block. Then we'll trim them up and we'll be done. Now, like I mentioned with the first one I did, you might be different people by now, so I'll repeat it. So I cut the strips, the last 4 strips, a little bit wider than necessary so that I can have extra to trim away around my block, and my block's going to be perfect square. I love that. Okay, that never happens. That never happens when I do regular piecing. So the next one we're on is A16. So we got to find A16. That's this edge and this edge. So right here is our A16 strip. Okay, A16. And now I'm going to pull out my A16 envelope that has the dimensions of the strips on in case I run out, in case I didn't cut enough. So this one, I have lots of this one, and I haven't used it since here. So I'm going to use this one. That's fine. Let's see here. And this block right here does not have any of this pretty rifle paper company print. I'm going to use that right there. And this one, I've already used this twice. I'm not going to reuse that. I use this fabric right here, but then it's really close to this one that is similar. Let's see here. You know what? That one needs this print. I have not used this print in that block yet. There we go. We're all good. Put these away in here on the pile of finished envelopes. Okay, so right side up, A16, fold it back. Okay, over to the sewing machine. And we're just going to sew almost to the paper. I guess before where I thought I stitched on the paper, I hadn't. That's good. Okay, my next one. Right side up. Okay, 16. Once you're working on bigger strips like this, once you're working on bigger pieces and the block is almost done, it sticks to the freezer paper so well. You saw at the very beginning when I was doing those tiny pieces at the very center, I did have to be careful to make sure it still stuck to the freezer paper. But now that I'm like at the very edges of the block, everything has been, there's so much fabric that is pressed on there that it sticks. Don't have to worry too much about it. This one, I'm going to trim off a little bit. Okay, Michelle has a question. Looks like an important question. Okay, Michelle asks, so the wax paper from the grocery store is the kind that is coated. Oh, I'm sorry. Freezer paper, not wax paper. Do not use wax paper, use freezer paper. You can use wax paper for something like this. Okay, because this is all, the only purpose of this paper is to keep all the little threads and fuzzies that might be on my pressing mat from getting on this, because I want to reuse my freezer paper. So, and you can also use one of those applique mats, or you can not use this. This is optional. This has to be freezer paper. Okay, let's see here. Yes, the one called wax paper is semi-transparent and waxed on both sides. And it can be used like to cover your pressing board so that you don't get threads and stuff on, so that nothing sticks. But make sure that you are using freezer paper for your piecing paper. Oh, this bad. That was a very good question. And there are freezer papers or quilters that you can buy that are already cut to be the right size for your printer. This one that I'm using is called Carol Doak. And the reason why I did that is just so that I didn't have to spend another step cutting my freezer paper to the right size for my printer, and only use a inkjet printer, not a laser printer, because laser printer gets too hot and it can melt the paper and it'll get stuck in there, and that's not a good thing. Now, you can also, like, if you don't want to use your printer, you can take your paper piecing design and you can just trace through the freezer paper that you bought at the grocery store, and trace the design onto the non-waxy side of your freezer paper. Like I have this design printed here. You can just trace it on, and then you won't have waste. Like I had waste when I cut these out. I had wasted freezer paper when I cut these out, all out of the 9.5, 8.5 by 11 size. You could trace them all really close to each other and have less waste. But I really, sometimes the extra expense is worth it. Here was for me. Okay, any more questions, guys? Okay. Look, so this one is going off the edge of the paper, because this line right here is where I'm going to trim it. So I made the outer strips all a little bit too, like 1/4 inch too wide, you see, so that I could have some to cut off. All right, we're on A17. A17 is right there. That one, and A17 envelope. All right. Oh, look, here's one I haven't used before, and it looks so good next to that. And this one, let's use this one. And let's see here, I've already used all these. This one I might have trouble finding one I haven't used before. That one's good though. Yeah, and this one, what is this one? Okay. Oh, I haven't used this one. It's okay. Save that for later. They don't have to be all different. I just want them to look good. There are 19 pieces. Can you believe 19 pieces in the 6-inch block? But it's working out. It's fun. They're perfect because I'm using this technique. So I'm going to press this, make it nice and flat. I'm going to have this right sides up. And here's my A17 line. Hold it back. This corner is going to match up. This is going to go off. And that's okay. This is going to be trimmed away. Okay. You can sew all the way across the strip. It's actually better to sew all the way across the strip rather than just point to point. the longer strips do get a little bit folded up inside the envelope. So right next to the fold on. Okay, so Elizabeth asked, how many times can you use the freezer paper? I have 2 here, 1. Okay, this is the only one. It's kind of thick. So I have reused them 4 or 5 times before. Now you notice that I am being very careful. I'm using the purpose of this pressing paper here, or you can use one of those pressing applique mats. The purpose of that is to help me keep this freezer paper clean. It's going to get some fuzzies on it because we're attaching it to fabric, but I'm doing my best to remove the threads after every use and keep it as clean as possible, so that, I mean, you can use it at least 3 times, and that's what everybody else says. Everybody else says you can use it 3 times, but because I'm being so careful, I have actually been able to use these more than 3 times. So, and then Judy says, thank you so much. I'm so glad, Judy. And this is a really accurate process that's very stress-free. It just takes a little bit longer, and that's okay. Okay, and we are almost done. We only have 2 more strips. Okay, so fold, and look, another totally wonky seam, but that doesn't matter because it covers all the way, and it does not look wonky from the front. It doesn't look wonky at all. It looks perfect from the front. That's why I love it. My seams on the back are totally wonky, but does not look wonky from the side that people look at. Oh, I didn't show you this. There we go. Okay. Back. I don't press too much from this side until it's big enough that my iron isn't going to touch the wax paper. The iron doesn't stick too much to the wax paper, but it can. Okay, so now we're going to do a 18, which is this one, and this one. So I take my little A18 envelope and I pick out strips. So here we have the cute sprinkles one that I haven't used yet. Let's make this one sprinkles. And this one has not had this polka dot one. Let's use polka dot. Let's see here. I already have the sprinkles. Let's see here. This one I've already used twice. Oh, look, I haven't used this one. I'm trying to use this one in this. That will look very nice. There's two here. Okay. Okay, only two more strips left. Oh. Then I'll trim them up and they're going to be so beautiful. No one will ever know that I had wonky seams. Okay, A18. This is the line for A18. Fold it back. Place them right sides together. Move it to the sewing machine. And just sew right next to the fold of the back. Okay, get another one ready. Has anyone used this process before? I'm really curious. It's not super new. It was new to me before I started this quilt, that I watched all kinds of YouTube videos, and then I practiced on a couple of practice blocks before I started using my good fabric. So I wonder if anyone has tried this technique before. Okay, only one strip left. Let's make sure these are all good. That one looks great. And it is actually, see that I cut the strip too wide, which was on purpose, so that this I will all trim away and my block will be perfectly square. See, this seemed totally wonky, but let's just make sure. Yep, it's gonna work. It doesn't look wonky from this side. Okay. Oops, I kind of unpeeled that a little bit. See, doesn't matter. Look at all those perfect log cabin logs. These are supposed to be 1/2 inch and these are supposed to be 3/4 inch. And it is so perfect because of this technique, not because I'm perfect. Not because I'm perfect. My seams are all wonky. Okay, so now we just have one strip left. I can see where it's gonna go because the paper is still showing. So let's pick out our last 3 strips. Let's see here. I don't want this. I haven't used this before. Let's use that. Oh my gosh, I made this whole block and I didn't use this beautiful dark strip. Okay, that has to have that. There's the last one. I could use like a very plain one there. Yeah, just use a very plain one there. Okay. The beauty of random is that it's going to look so beautiful when it's finished, even if my random isn't very good. Okay, so now I just have these last 3 pieces to sew on, and then I'll trim up the blocks and then I'll be done for today. And I made 4. Oh, this is extra. I made 4 my blocks that I need to make 81 of. I'm crazy, but I am, like, I'm so enjoying this process. I'm so enjoying the fact that I can make very intricate blocks, a 6-inch block with 19 pieces, and it's stress-free. That's what I love about this. I would like never be able to sew a 6-inch block, any 6-inch block really, unless it's like 3 pieces, without feeling stressed. Sewing tiny pieces generally stresses me out. But using this technique, it really is so easy. Once you get the technique down, you know, once you've done it a few times and it just kind of comes naturally, then you can turn on the TV, turn on your favorite podcast, turn on music and sew and dance. And you see that I also, it's very, very helpful to me to have my pressing area right here, so close to my sewing machine, that I'm sitting in a swivel chair. I'm actually sitting in a gaming chair. Another, we're stealing Twitch away from the gamers, so we can also steal the gaming chairs away from the gamers. Haha. Okay. It's true though. I'm sitting in a gaming chair. It gives me great back support. So, okay, so I'm going to place this right side up. It's the last one. Okay, Judy says, oh, she has used this technique with log cabins before. Yeah, it's just so stress-free, and all my little logs are so perfect. I didn't with, okay, so here's the quilt that I'm making, and here's the one that I made before it. With this one, I just used a regular piecing technique, and it took a long time, and I pieced it very slowly. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but I pieced it very slowly to make it the seam allowances as good as I can, because I just used regular piecing. So now that I'm making one with even smaller pieces, that's why I am using this technique, because my logs are finishing at 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch, and I don't want to stress about having perfect seam allowances for that. And this technique helps me make perfect logs without stressing. All right. AC, turn it back on. Okay, so I'm done sewing. Yeah, I just need to press and trim, and you want to see this because it's so cool. And then you really want to see me remove the paper from the blocks, because let me tell you, it is not like regular paper piecing where you have to remove itty bitty pieces and tons of them. It is so wonderful. So there's that one. And all of my pieces, even the ones where I got a little generous with my seam allowance, it's okay, because they all go over the edge. Okay. So now look at those perfectly sized logs, 1/2 inch logs, 3/4 inch logs. They're so perfectly sized. And I wasn't stressing about it. Okay, so here's my little cutting mat. Love this little cutting mat. Okay, and I'm gonna trim from this side. A little ruler. And my little, okay, I'm gonna turn it like this. My little ruler is not long enough at the beginning, but that's okay. And I discovered this when I was trimming the other block. My rotary blade is dull. Don't you hate that? Okay. Trim that side. I'm just trimming, since I've used these papers before and the papers have already been trimmed. I'm putting the 1/4 inch markings on my ruler right against this, which is the inside edge of the block, the 6 inch inside edge. So I'm giving myself a 1/4 inch seam allowance for sewing my blocks together. And I'm just running my rotary cutter twice, because I know it's dull, and after this I'm gonna have to change the blade. Okay. The big reveal will come in a minute after I've trimmed all my blocks. Oh, I almost cut my knee. Okay, don't do that. Oh, I didn't cut my pants. Thank goodness. That was almost a hospital visit. Never rush while you're sewing, friends. Never rush. When we rush, that's when we have accidents. Okay, block number 2. And you see it's already starting to come off the paper, which is fine. This can be so easy. No little pieces to rip. I really like, as much as I love foundation paper piecing, the regular kind of foundation paper piecing, the part that I struggle with the most is removing the papers, because I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm damaging the block when I'm removing the papers. So that's another reason why I love this technique, is because the papers come off so fast, and I don't have to, and I can reuse them as long as I've kept them clean. As long as I've tried to keep the threads and the fuzzies off, I can reuse them multiple times. I think this is like, I have reused them like 4 or 5 times. And I try my best to use them as much as I can. Okay, last trim. Yay! Okay, all of these beautiful navy blue trimmings. Okay. All right, here's the big reveal. You're not going to believe how easy it is. And if you've ever spent hours and hours unpicking papers from regular paper piecing, this is going to blow your mind. Ta-da! Look at this perfectly square 6.5-inch block that when I sew it together will just be 6 inches. And not to brag or anything, but look, my logs are perfectly sized. 1/2-inch log, 1/2-inch log, 3/4-inch log, 3/4-inch log. And I am not a careful piecer. I mean, I try to be a careful piecer, but I could not have accomplished this without this technique. Ta-da! So easy. It comes off so easy, and my block is like so perfect. Okay, last one. And then I'll show you how I clean up the papers so that they can be used more. Okay, the paper does get threads on it. Ta-da! Beautiful block. Okay, so then after that, I will just take tweezers and pull off the big threads, because just by taking a few minutes to pull off threads, then that means that this can be reused more. There's kind of a lot of threads on this one, so you can also use a lint remover. It doesn't work as good as tweezers generally, but I think it removes fuzz too, so I try and do both. Try and use both the lint remover and the tweezers to clean these up the best that I can, so that I can reuse them again and again and again. They're already folded, so all the crease lines are already in them, and I can totally keep using these if I clean them up. Anyway, okay, so now what's left for me to do is to clean my sewing machine, so that next week or next Tuesday, when I have my next live stream, I can just get right into sewing. I know it's annoying to clean your sewing machine, but if I clean my sewing machine when I'm done, then the next time I come up to my sewing room to sew, I can just get right at it. Look at all the little fuzzies. You'd be surprised how many little fuzzies you get inside your sewing machine. And here's the bobbin case. I'm just gonna clean that out. This is my navy blue 60 weight thread. that I'm using for this project. Come on, fuzzies, come on. Never ever use canned air, whether you have an expensive sewing machine or a starter sewing machine. You never ever want to use canned air. On this sewing machine, you take off the hook race. I'm going to clean it. And I'm also going to clean underneath, but I'm not going to move the camera to show you. But I'll just brush away any lint and fuzzies that are underneath the sewing machine. And then, so Bernina's are thirsty sewing machines. Thirsty sewing machines. So I need to put oil. There's a felt pad that is in between two layers of plastic or metal in this little hook race. And so I'm going to put a drop of oil there on the felt pad, drop of oil there, and there. And that is necessary. And also a drop of oil. And that keeps my baby Bernina going. So now I'll put the hook race back in. You can use a little vacuum. I do have a little vacuum that I use, but it's not next to my sewing machine right now. Okay, so I just put the hook race back in. I'll put the little bobbin back in. And then my baby girl's all ready to sew next time. All right, so anybody who wants to catch my machine embroidery, the next live stream that I have planned, granted, I might come on sometime and just work on blocks, and I'll call that just a chatting live stream. And the only place I will stream that is to Twitch. So if you're on Twitch and you follow me, you will get a notification that I'm live, and I'm just going to be sewing and chatting, and I'll be up here. And I turned on the live stream because I wanted someone to sew with. So if you want to do that with me, just make sure that you follow me on Twitch, and then we can sew together some night. But the next planned live stream that I have is going to be Tuesday night at 8 p.m. And I'm going to set this machine all up for embroidery. And we are going to do some in the hoop sunglasses cases. And the pattern is free on my blog, or right now I have a link to somewhere else where the pattern is free, but it's my design. So I will also provide it free on my blog. I'll get that all ready. I'll tell you about it in the newsletter, so that if you have a embroidery machine and you want to embroider that, then we'll go through that whole process. But if you don't have an embroidery machine, that's okay. Just come and lurk, come and watch, come and ask questions, because machine embroidery is super, super fun. And the in the hoop projects are fun because we get it all done. All the quilting on the sunglasses case and all of the edges and everything will be all done on the embroidery machine. So when you take it out, you have a beautiful project. So, and I'll show you some different techniques to use and some different materials that you can use, and because you might want to try some new stabilizers or something. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I hope you have enjoyed this technique. Like I said, I have a lot more blocks to make, so I'll just be doing this from time to time. I'll just turn on, and if you want to see it again, you can always rewatch it again or catch me when I'm just sewing an unscheduled live stream, and you'll see me working on this project. So thanks to everybody. Oh, okay, a few more questions. Nancy says hello from Massachusetts. Hi, Nancy. Make sure that you can rewatch this after so you can see everything we did. Michelle says, what is the Carol Doak paper? Oh, okay. Let me find a link to it on Amazon. Let me just take a little break here, and I will find it on Amazon. Oh my gosh, maybe it wasn't hers. Maybe it wasn't hers that I've been talking about, saying the wrong thing. Okay, which is the one that I bought? Oh, okay. I am so sorry. This is the one that I bought. I am grabbing a link and I'm going to put it in the comments. It wasn't Carol Doak's. It was Quilter's Freezer paper from C&T. And I'm going to put a link right here. Okay, there's a link. Not that that's what you have to use. That's not what you have to use. You can really use any freezer paper. This link of what I put in is what I actually am using because it comes pre-cut in 8.5 by 11 sheets that I use in my inkjet printer, not a laser printer because it'll melt, but an inkjet printer. So I print my pieces, and you can use this technique with any paper piecing pattern. There are millions, thousands of paper piecing patterns out there. I especially love to shop for them on Etsy because then I'm supporting independent makers. There's a free one on my website. If you search for butterfly mini quilt, there's a free one that's super simple and easy. It's a great one to get started with. The instructions that I provide are not like this because I provide traditional paper piecing instructions, but you can use this technique with any paper piecing pattern. All right, you are welcome, Dawn. You're welcome, Linda. All right. I hope that you use this technique. I would love to see it if you post your pictures on Instagram and tag me at SoCanChi so that I can take a look and see that you're using it. It's been so much fun. So I'm going to end now. I will see you all Tuesday night or maybe some other time when we have random chatting sew together time, only on Twitch. So follow me on Twitch. All right. Love you guys. I'll see you next time.